So we're now live. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome. Before I move on to the formal business, for the benefit of those joining us online today, I would firstly like to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Charlie Keith, and I'm proud to be the Mayor of Wakefield Metropolitan District Council. And I'm joined today by members of the Council from the 21 wards across the district. Gillian Marshall, who's the legal officer, is over my left-hand side, and Catherine McGowan is making sure that we've got all the connections that we can possibly have. Nick Farmer is on now, thank you very much. So we should all be here. And so we're on with. So before we go any further, I'm going to hand over for the final time to my chaplain, the Reverend Rob Drost, to lead us in prayer. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. I am sure we will mention later that yesterday was 1 year on since the first national lockdown. It is unlikely that we thought we would still be in a type of lockdown 12 months on from the 23rd of March last year. As we approach Easter, we are reminded those disciples of Jesus also did not expect to be watching their friend and teacher dying on a cross. Yet 12 months on from that, the first new church was born. Its teachings was easy but radical: to love and to care for your neighbour. Today we continue to be thankful for the love and care that our council workers, NHS staff and key workers give to us and to our wards. So let's pray together. God of love and peace, we are here to make decisions for our communities in which we serve as elected representatives. May we use only our best skills, words and judgments, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us. May we always act in accordance with what is best for our communities and its citizens. For we ask this in the name of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Ishmael, who calls us to be one in mind and in deed for the good of all people. Amen.
Thank you for that, Rob. And thank you for all that you've done for me as my chaplain in the last 2 years, really, and particularly in the last 12 months in those difficult times. I'd like to remind colleagues to ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the meeting unless you're invited to speak, to minimise the potential of background noise disrupting the meeting that we're about to broadcast. If you'd wish to ask a question or comment, please indicate you want to do so by typing Q or C in the comment box. Please only use that comment box for that purpose, if you don't mind, particularly today when we get onto the motions in front of us. When invited to speak, please unmute your microphone and state your name before addressing the council. Please remute your microphone once you've finished speaking. Can I also take this opportunity to remind all members that you'll only be allowed to speak once and up to for 5 minutes on each of the reports, motions and the amendments. Item 2 on the council summons is to receive disclosures by members of interest in matter under consideration. Will members declaring an interest please identify themselves and their particular interest clearly and complete the usual yellow form before the end of the meeting. I think that will have to be got to you, or you'll do it online. Firstly, colleagues, are there any disclosable pecuniary interests to be declared?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to declare an interest on agenda item D.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Austin. And I'm also advised that I don't know whether Councillor Tully wants to do the same. No.
Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
Darren Byford, could I please declare a disposable pecuniary interest on item D also, please?
Thank you for that, Councillor Byford. Okay, are there any other significant other interests to be declared? Are there any other interests to be declared at all? Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is to receive and confirm the minutes from the council meetings held on the 16th of December 2020, that's last year, and 24th of February this year. Are the minutes moved?
Move the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jeffrey. Are the minutes seconded?
Second the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hemingway. Does anyone wish to vote against the minute? Okay, I'll take your silence as an indication that the minutes are approved as a true record. Agenda item number 4 is to receive apologies for absence. And apologies for absence have been received in advance of this meeting from councillors Mrs. Blizzard, Manifield, Mrs. Mitchell, Ward, Womersley, and Councillor Martin Johnson. Are there any further apologies? If not, thank you, and we'll move on to item number 5, which is to deal with such announcements as I may decide to lay before council. Yeah, we did collectively record yesterday the 12 months since the first lockdown. Many have been remembering what they were doing a year ago and thoughts yearning back to what they want to fondly call the normal, the place they want to be as soon as possible. Since our last meeting, I've been conducting mayor thanks Skype to Wakefield Metropolitan District Council staff. Did 3 this morning to the emergency planners and various other people and the planning department, who have been exceptional over the pandemic, with anecdotal evidence of the perils and plights in the districts of the district residents and businesses that they've lived through and they've given their help to. Say, please don't draw back. They tell me that they don't deserve a cost of living pay rise, because I think every one of them has been absolutely exemplary. I've also conducted similar events to key workers in the community, like shop workers and supermarket staff. Those doing click and collect deliveries, stacking shelves, operating checkouts, driving supply chain lorries, security guards, admin staff, trolley retrievers. It isn't about the companies that they work for or the corporate image. It's about saying thank you to the everyday people who put their coat on to go to work in the morning, not knowing what they might bring home with their shift. It's about keeping us supplied and fed and watered and well clothed, postal workers who still maintain deliveries, keeping us updated and informed and connected. Not paid a fortune and too many times facing abuse for their jobs. I'm determined to say thank you over the next 8 weeks on behalf of the citizens of Wakefield to as many of them that I possibly can. So if you have any nominations, we will be dealing with them after Easter when the Mayor's office is open back up. And the office is slightly a little bit understaffed at the moment. Jane Idle having taken redundancy, but the thing is that we'll get all the nominations. I was asked today where one of the nominations have gone. Make sure we do them after Easter when restrictions are lifted a little bit. I've also selected 12 different outlets, one Tesco, one Asda, one Aldi, across the district, and asked them to nominate a small local charity to which I will make a donation of £100 on their behalf. In that way, some of the little local charities across the district who hasn't been able to hold a flag day or a tombola stall for raise funds will get some income leached down to them from my Helping Hand Fund. I've also used my contact at Pinderfields Hospital to continue to say Mayor says thanks, as I promised you that I would undertake, to all those who've been working at the hospital, the true heroes who bravely face personal danger daily, only to be undervalued it seems, but I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I want to point out today is my last full meeting as Mayor to officiate over it. You had to get somebody else next time, Tracy Austin, stand by. However, I'm offering my mayoral thanks on this occasion to everybody. I can't do it at the annual mayor making ceremony because this ceremony will be somewhat curtailed and have limitations this year. So this will be the last time I will have the opportunity to say this to all of you together. I'd like to say a big thank you to you, all of you, my fellow councillors, for keeping up the standards that what the watching public expect of us, while also keeping up a good quality level of lively debate and accurate scrutiny of full council. Be that in the chamber or have we been learning to do the new tricks that we've learned, the new virtual format. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be mayor, and I'm proud to have served alongside you in full council. Thank you very much indeed. To those councillors standing down, you are owed a deep gratitude for the work you've done and undertaken and completed for the citizens of district. I wish you all the health and happiness possible from those citizens, and I thank you for all the work that you've done since you've been a councillor. I know you'll be standing down this time, and as I say, I won't be able to get the chance to do it at the mayor making ceremony, but thank you most sincerely for all the work you've done. The cathedral sometime in May, We did talk in terms of doing a socially distanced vigil, but we'll get back to that one. That might be a private thing. I'll also be holding and posting the Easter exit, which we'll be doing at Pinderfields Hospital with our friends from Wakefield Street Kitchen, where we get some Easter eggs to the children on the kids ward and in the burns unit at Pinderfields Hospital for Easter. Wakefield Street Kitchens, as you know, I consider them the guardian angels of this city, doing a fantastic job. Over 300 people served with hot meals last week alone. I will also be holding a meeting to finalise the Wakefields Association with the Royal Naval Vessel, HMS Agamemnon, a privilege normally bestowed on cities much bigger than ours, but a privilege and an association we can be rightly proud of for many years to come. I will be completing the presentations of my charity fund and helping hand funds to recipients like the Macular Society, Dementia Ward, Cardiac Rehabilitation, Nottingley Adventure Playground, Activity for All at Featherstone, and many more. I will also, as indicated, complete all the outstanding Mercer thanks before my term is over. So in the words of a top 10 song, let's get down to business, if you will. That's item 5. And so we're going to move on, as you would naturally expect. We're going to move on to agenda item 7. What am I saying? So the next item on the agenda is the leader's report. Once the leader has presented her report, she will answer any questions from members on the matters raised by her report for a maximum of 30 minutes, and then be allowed a report to follow in 30 minutes for you to send in any questions or answers to. Please indicate those in the text box, and I'm going to hand her over now for her report to the leader of the council, Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we marked the COVID year yesterday, Councillor Hemingway and myself, by planting a tree in the Coronation Garden, a cherry tree. But we shall be looking at creating a lasting memorial garden somewhere in the district to mark all the people that we've lost over the last year. I think that is a fitting thing to do, and we will be consulting with members about where they think that we should have this memorial garden. I'd like to pay tribute myself to 4 of my colleagues who were standing down at this time. Councillor Roslund, Councillor Celia Loughran, Councillor Martin Ward and Graham Stokes. You've been amazing councillors for your communities. And you've been great colleagues to us all in the Labour group, and I'm sure across the council. I'm sad to see that you're standing down, and I know particularly that Graham has certainly done his time as the longest standing member. I can remember when Graham came on the council, and before I was on the council, and Graham really was one of the youngest councillors. We have a lot of young councillors now, but at that time it was quite exceptional that we had a young councillor, and I was at the other side of the fence on the trade union side, negotiating with Graham at that time. So I do wish you all the very best, all of you, in whatever you're going to do, and I'm sure we'll see you again in some other life. The AGM will take place and the mayor making in May, but it will be slightly different, and you will all be getting information about this, but it will be held in the cathedral this year so that we can have more space and more people there. We won't be able to have as many guests as we could before, and we won't be able to have as many elected members, but that will be sorted out by Gillian Marshall's team, and she will get back to the controlling group and to the Lib Dem area, so that we can all take part in the mayor making as best we can, but obviously with reduced numbers. I just want to say I've instigated an independent review of the issues that relate to the recent repairs to Sandal Magna School. This will be carried out by Anthony Collins solicitors, who have a national reputation for their legal work and knowledge of local government contracts and construction. The report they produce will be shared with all councillors and will be debated at a future council meeting. I don't intend to take any questions or answer any questions on this today, but we will hopefully bring the full report back to the earliest council meeting that we can, and a full debate can take place then. Just a few other things, Mr. Mayor. The Towns Fund, we were very successful to get 35 million for Wakefield and 24 million for Castleford. Now, it always seems to me that it's always Wakefield and Castleford that get the funding, and of course they are the biggest towns, and they were invited to bid. We didn't put the bids forward, but we were successful. But what we took action on was to put a considerable amount of investment for other parts of the district, for the South East, for Horbury and Ossett, and all the other towns. We are one city, but we are 10 towns, and we need to make sure that investment is spread across the district. So that's one of the things that we're doing. If you recall, I did mention last time that we were going to invest in brightening up our town centres with flowers and vinyls in the shop fronts. But we have been successful. I found out today that we received over 300,000 from the government to brighten up our towns as well. So that's really welcome news. And what we shall be doing is put that together with what we were going to do, and we really will be able to make a difference. The Levelling Up Fund, I've had conversations with the MPs, with the Wakefield MP and with the Hemsworth constituency MP and Yvette Cooper about how we can apply for funding for all our towns in their constituencies. Some of you will have seen some of the plans that have been in the paper already for Wakefield, very ambitious plans. And we'll see where we go with that. But obviously, we will accept funding for whatever we can for our district and for our towns and cities. I had the pleasure last week to cut the ribbon on the new leisure centre in Pontefract, and my goodness, what a fabulous place that is. It really rivals any private sector. It's really top quality. And I can't wait for people to actually be able to use it. The 2 swimming pools, the sports park overlooking the lake, it's just absolutely amazing facility, and it's something that we can be proud of. We took to Cabinet last week the paper on building the public sector housing at Fitzwilliam, and we shall be moving forward with that. And the billboards have gone up there, and I think they're already causing quite excitement there. The other thing I want to bring to your attention are the youth zones that we're going to create, one at Light Waves and one in Hemsworth. This will provide youth facilities, care facilities for young people, advice on careers, any mental health issues that anyone may have, really a complete package for young people across our area. And I think that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Jeffrey. Very comprehensive report, as per usual. Are there any questions to Councillor Jeffrey on her report, or any queries that you want sorting out? I'm going to take first Councillor Collins, Michelle Collins. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up from your point, Denise, on the public sector housing. Last week, at the beginning of last week, WDH informed local members that they are closing their service access points within our communities, notably South Emsall and Airedale access points, and the only ones remaining will be in Wakefield and Pontefract. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that it's not good enough, particularly as we're coming out of this pandemic and, you know, we're trying to build communities back, and we want to focus really on building everything up. There's been no proper consultation on this at all, and as of this afternoon I've still not received the answers to the questions that I've asked WDH on what considerations they've taken on this. There just doesn't seem to be an impact on what this will have on members of our community when making this decision. Now, we all know that we're in an area and an age of digital poverty, and people don't necessarily have the skills or the means to be able to just access things either online or on the telephone. And they also don't have the means to be able to travel when you can get a bus these days to get to there. And it just feels like a bit of a cost-cutting exercise on the back of a pandemic, but it doesn't feel like they're considering the real cost to this, which is the cost of human life and union experiences. And I just wonder if you can offer Denise and the council any assistance on this campaign to sort of get them to reconsider, because our areas will lose a vital service. They're called service access points for a reason, and they should be accessible. So I'd welcome your thoughts on that, really, and any support you can give.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michelle. Yeah, I am quite dismayed at the actions of WDH on this and the lack of consultation. I don't think they've taken into account the fact it will affect the town centres with footfall, people going in to raise queries in the access points and then going for a coffee or shopping in the local town. It really will have a bad knock-on effect. I think it's not the right thing to do, and I've asked for a meeting with the chief exec of WDH along with our chief executive so that we can move things forward. It's just not acceptable, and I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jeffrey. I'm going to go next to Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to, I know obviously there is currently an action that's taken place as a result of a request of information in relation to Sandal Magna, but I would ask what the scope of the investigation or the independent review is going to do. So what is the, we know what we've heard in the press and what's factual in terms of the cost and finances. Obviously this involves an academy, and so it's a wider scope of when the transfer that took place, how that transfer took place, also in relation to how the financial, how somebody was paid and for carrying out no work or little work. So I'm just wondering what the scope of the investigation is and what remit has the solicitor been given in relation to this. But I would like to say that obviously I welcome this investigation, and I think it's important that as all elected members that we always hold ourselves open and accountable to these sort of situations. And it's important that we make sure that taxpayers' money is spent in the most wisest way. And I think that this is important that this has come forward and recognise that there obviously has been a mistake somewhere. But I will allow the investigation to do that. But the main area of focus at the moment is what the scope of the investigation is. And in terms of ambition and press reports in there, I think it's important that we as elected members show that Wakefield and the whole of Wakefield district is ambitious in terms of attracting investment or having things in Wakefield that other towns and cities have as well, such as Sheffield and Leeds. And we might be sandwiched between two major cities who attract investment, but it shows that there is a government commitment in order to make sure things do happen. And I've heard the leader of the council acknowledge that. But it's a comment on myself here. I think 35 million is a small amount of money, and I know some people will give other alternative perspectives on there. But it's important, and particularly the 35 million and the 24 has gone to Castleford. It's important that we continue to sell Wakefield in a positive light and have ambition for our future generations of people here. So things that are present in Leeds didn't happen overnight, and things that happen in Sheffield didn't happen overnight. It's about vision and planning. So it's important that we set our vision, and if government support or help is needed, we do that. Because if we don't have an ambition for the city, then we often will not be able to present that in the best possible way. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Ahmed. I'm going to let Councillor Jeffries answer that one, but I did note that you did say that you weren't taking questions on school, but I'll let Councillor Jeffrey answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Nadeem. Yes, the scope goes back actually to 2008, but so that members are fully aware, I don't want to go into the debate now, but so that members are fully aware, I will ask officers to forward the scope of the investigation. As you say, this is public money, and we want to make sure that everything is done in a proper manner. So you will see the scope, but it is a full investigation. And the people that we've asked to do this are fully qualified to do that. But we will send you the information for your group. And And when you talk about the fact that we have ambition, we as a Labour group have a full ambition all across the district, and I hope that the Conservative group will support what we want to do across the district. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for that. Can I just put in at that juncture, Nadine, you know, I stood in Wakefield South some years ago and I struck up a bit of a rapport with Sandal Magna. They still send me a calendar annually from their thing, and I just want to say, don't let's forget that it's some lovely, lovely, endearing kids that it's about. It's not their fault, they've got a league in it. Next up, we've got Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say a big thanks to Denise and Jack for actually looking at these youth hubs and spreading them out among the district. I think it's fantastic. As you know, in Airedale, we've had the hub for quite some while, and it does show what a place like the hub can do for any sort of area. Before the pandemic, we had 12 months where we'd actually reformed the hut and had youth clubs in there. We had some youngsters, male and female, learning how to cook. We've got football teams based there. We'd started to get the kids something to do off the streets, and unfortunately the pandemic hit. And if it shows how much these things are needed, over the last 12 months, when we haven't been able to get kids back in there, we've certainly had a number of issues around Airedale and Castleford with youths doing things what maybe they shouldn't do, and what, if the hut was still open, we could certainly have had a number of different outcomes. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I think spreading them across the district and developing them with some of the fantastic things that I know Margaret's got planned is the way forward. And we look forward in Airedale to the hut opening again soon, so we can start to get some of these kids back in there and starting to develop things, certainly for the future of Castleford and Airedale. So well done. I think this is the way forward. Just one other quick point on what Michelle said. I think Michelle's certainly right about WDH. I did receive some information from Mick last night, reiterating exactly the same as what they were saying before. So although they've received all the complaints, it looks like, Denise, that they're still not communicating or not really taking notice of certainly elected representatives that's worked with WDH for a number of years, and I find that a disappointment. So well done, and I'm sorry to say I'm disappointed at WDH. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Shaw. I'm going on now to take a question from Councillor Angela Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Jeffrey, could I just say that I'm delighted that the other side of the district has got this wonderful sports centre with 2 swimming pools, etc., etc., etc. And you say that the Labour Party have ambition. What ambition have the Labour Party got to give us at this side of the district a similar facility, please?
I think the best thing on that, Andrew, is we are putting, I know you're hinting at the swimming pool that was promised years ago. We haven't got an ambition for a swimming pool. We can't afford another swimming pool. We've got the one in the 5 towns. We've got a super one in Wakefield, which is just down the road from Ossett. But there are things that we can do in Ossett. And what I suggest that we have a meeting with the 3 Ossett members to talk about how we can put the funding that we have for your area into good use. I have been approached by somebody today about a facility, so I obviously want to talk to the 3 of you about that. So I will arrange a meeting with you, but I'm afraid no swimming pool.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Jeffrey. I'm on to the next question, or sorry, a comment from Councillor Olivia Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just say how delighted I am to hear about light waves. I think during the pandemic, what we've really seen is particularly young people suffer. and I think they will need a lot of support in the future. And I'm really glad that it's going to be based in the city centre at Lightwaves. I think that we really need to do so much for young people, if only the budget would allow it. Back in 2010, we had 7 million removed from the youth service budget by the government. And it's really important that we try to compensate that loss by doing something for young people. And it will be hopefully accessible to so many because it's so near the bus station. So I'm really excited about it, and it's great news. Thank you.
Up next, I've got a question from Councillor Gillian Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Denise, you've just said that you have a meeting with the Ossett councillors regarding future leisure facilities over in the west. I'd like Horbury and South Ossett to be included in that, please, because we are neighbouring wards and we care very much about that too. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't actually had the meeting, Gillian. I will be happy to have one, but it hasn't taken place yet.
Yeah, I know. It's just that you said Ossett councillors and, well, Horbury and South Ossett. I'd like to be included in that as well, please.
Fine, we can sort that out.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you for that, and a comment there for thanking Gillian from Councillor Simon Fishwick. If we've done with that, I've got one question coming in from Councillor Thomas Gordon.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I find disappointing is again that we see that it's already, and I know we're only not even half an hour into this council meeting, and we seem to be hearing the same lines that are trotted out time and time again, that there's no money for things in other parts of the district, but then we've miraculously found money to invest in things which fit the Labour Party's agenda. And it's again just disappointing already, just overhearing the comments and conversations that have been had about providing facilities and other sort of recreational centres in other parts of the district, been told that there's no money. But it was only a month ago when there was the opportunity for the Labour group to fix the problems in my town, the problems that they created, and you chose not to. And I find it just really, quite frankly, condescending and quite patronising that you still think that people are unable to differentiate between political decisions. And at the end of the day, running a council, the decisions that you make, if you are in a position to be running a council, are political. And we seem to still be in the same situation. We go round and round about having sports centres and swimming pools in Ossett or in Nottingley, and then we just don't seem to ever make any headway. So I'll just sort of ask, in terms of looking at money that's coming into other areas, like one of the most bleak moments actually was when I was having a conversation with the chief financial officer about, oh well, we always keep being told that there's 50 odd million pounds of regeneration for Nottingley, and then when I asked, well, where is this 50 million pounds in last month's budget, it's not there. So what my question to you, Denise, really is when are we actually going to see regeneration investment? I've asked council officers a number of times to even see the plans for the Kellenley Club that's going to become the new community hub, and every time we seem to just get told, oh, it's coming, and we don't actually have any actions. If you'd be able to sort of just elaborate or give any answers to any of those sort of points, it'd be appreciated.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. The fact that we're spending £4.5 million in Nottingley, you seem to be avoiding that.
You're not spending that though, Denise. Money's coming from other places. That's not what Wakefield Council is investing.
I'll listen to you, Tom. Will you listen to me, please?
Tom, I want you to put your mic back on mute, if you will, please, and I'll listen to Councillor Jeffrey. Thank you.
With £4.5 million going into Nottingley, and I think a lot of areas like Ossett and Horbury and some of the other areas would be more than grateful to having £4.5 million. But the investment for the 50 million is not council money. It's investment that will come through a regeneration programme. Now, I'm sorry if you haven't seen the plans for Kellenley Club. I'm surprised that you haven't, but I will make sure that you see them because they are available for the public as well as elected members. So I am surprised that you haven't seen them. So we will make sure that you see them. But as you know, the 50 million that is talked about through regeneration is over a 10-year plan. Nottingham really needs investment, I accept that. And we're starting with the club and the sporting facilities. So, you know, I don't know what else I can say to you on that, but you know very well that what is happening with Kellingley Club. But you seem to choose to ignore that and don't want to get involved in it, which does surprise me.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Jeffrey. And as I say, we've got a very full item agenda today. If you wouldn't mind, when you've asked your question, going back home to mute, because all the questions should be through the chair. That concludes the questions on the leaders' report, and I've got no more coming in. So we're going to move on now to agenda item number 8, which is to receive the written cabinet member reports in accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 14.1. Cabinet members will have up to 5 minutes to present their report, and there will be a further 15 minutes allocated to enable each cabinet member to respond to any questions or brief comments on issues with their respective portfolio. Again, please indicate in the box that you want to make a comment or a question. So we're moving on for the first of those reports, and I'm going to call on Councillor Hemingway, the Deputy Leader and the portfolio holder for Climate Change and Green Space. Councillor Hemingway, will you please introduce your report to full council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to start by echoing the leader and your own comments on our retiring colleagues this year. I just want to thank them all for the service and for being a voice in their communities in this council chamber and beyond. And also I want to thank yourself, Mr. Mayor, for 2 years of very good service to the people of this district. I think you've been an excellent ambassador, and you've managed to keep us in good order, and we've not ended up in a Handforth Parish Council situation, which is much to be appreciated. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. In moving my report, I'd like to draw members' attention to agenda page 21 and our White Rose Forest tree planting initiatives. Since the council agenda has been published, we've actually now launched our new Woodland Creation Hub, and that's going to see us plant 2.6 million trees over the next 25 years, with about 500,000 trees being planted in the next 5. You can visit the hub by searching for Woodland Creation on the council website, and we're going to be encouraging volunteers to sign up on there and help us make the next tree planting season our biggest ever, and I'm happy to circulate details of that to any members that may be interested. Finally, just adding to my report on page 23, I want to place on record my thanks to our street scene and parks teams, and they've been doing an absolutely fantastic job making improvements to parks around the district in recent months and working with volunteer groups as well. I think it's been a very challenging time for them, dealing with increased levels of public demand and use of our parks, as well as the social distancing restrictions and other factors related to the pandemic, but they've done a great job, and we're putting in some exciting plans for our parks for later in this year. So thank you to those teams for the excellent work they've been doing. And with that, I will move my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hemingway, and thank you for your remarks as well. Much appreciated. Any questions or comments to Councillor Hemingway on his report? Can't see any new ones coming up. So I'll thank you, Councillor, for that report, and I'll move on to the next portfolio holder, which is for adults, health and well-being. And I'm going to ask for Councillor Mrs. Heptonstall, if you please introduce your report to full council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. In moving my report, I'd like to add and acknowledge the news announced last week that Joe Webster, Chief Officer at Wakefield CCG, will be taking on the role of Corporate Director for Adults Health and Wellbeing from the 1st of April. As part of current partnership working arrangement, Joe has worked closely with the council for a number of years now, and I'm really looking forward to working with her in her new role, and particularly developing how we can collectively further improve the health and the lives of residents in the Wakefield district. As I welcome Joe, Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to say the biggest thank you to Councillor Lund, who supported me as my deputy for almost 2 years. As I have said in my report, Ros has been an ambassador for the Wakefield district in the various roles she's undertaken, particularly that of Mayor. So thank you, Ros, for all your support, and we wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you. And with that, I remove my report, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mrs. Heptonstall. Any questions or any comments to Councillor Mrs. Heptonstall on her report? Got none coming up indicated in the box. So thank you once again for that report. And I'm moving on to the next one, which is for the portfolio holder for children and young people. Councillor Mrs Isherwood, would you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Councillor Isherwood, I'm happy to produce my report. I'd like to make reference to the holiday activities fund, the Happy Healthy Holidays, and also the funding that's been received from Public Health to help towards making holiday time so much better for many of our young people across the district. I'd also like to perhaps expand on the residential transformation piece. This to me is an exciting model moving forward. Our vision is to build on the success of the child-focused two-bedded homes that have now been open for about 18 months. These two-bedded units provide a safe home in a more family-like environment for some of our more complex children. And originally these children were placed some distance from Wakefield and often had multiple placement disruptions. We found that this model of working has greatly improved the outcomes for those children, and additionally there's been no disruption to the placements. In fact, the children have been supported to access local services and education and have thrived in these settings. So moving forward, we're hoping to develop more of the two-bedded homes, and over time this model will replace the larger children's homes. And we strongly believe that our most vulnerable should stay close to home, to family, and to those people that are their close relationships. We also have taken an innovative approach to working with our partners in health to develop a model within the district for those children who demonstrate extremely challenging behaviour, generally presenting as a risk to themselves or others because of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Often these responses arise from significant childhood trauma. This approach will enable us to work closely with our partners to support children to remain close to their families and maintain key relationships, whilst addressing their needs in a timely way. So I'm pleased about this. I think it's an innovative approach. I think it benefits our children. I think anything to me that children are at the heart of everything we do. Moving on from that, the youth zones, the youth support hubs, absolutely brilliant. I'm hoping I'll be able to fetch a more in-depth report on that to the next council meeting. But the development of these youth support hubs strongly emphasises the commitment of this council and its partners to have to continually improve services and support for the children and young people of Wakefield District. So that's something to look forward to. And also I'll just make reference to the recent annual engagement letter from Ofsted, which we feel was positive and reflected the positive feedback from the last monitored visit. So thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and with that I present my report.
Thank you for that, Councillor Isherwood. It's an in-depth report that you're giving us there. Are there any comments or questions to Councillor Mrs Isherwood on that report? Can't see none indicated. Thank you once again, Councillor Mrs Isherwood. On to the next portfolio holder, who is the portfolio holder for culture, leisure and sport. And I'm going to call on Councillor Mrs Spade to introduce your report to full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're currently working very hard to get all our facilities ready to open as lockdown restrictions now ease. And the start of this will be the reopening of Wakefield Golf Course on the 29th of March, because of course that is outdoors. On the 12th of April, as long as the lockdown roadmap is followed, we'll be able to reopen our gyms and pools with some restrictions. And of course, that includes our new facility at Aspire in the Park mentioned by the leader. So we're delighted that that is going to be opened. And of course, at that time, the old pool at Pontefract will be decommissioned. From the 1st of April, Pontefract Castle grounds will be back to normal opening, and our museums will be opening in Castleford and Wakefield on the 17th of May, with Pontefract a little bit later on the 24th of May to allow the setup of a new exhibition. Our libraries have been providing a click and collect service throughout lockdown, but they'll be open again to browsing on the 12th of April. And we're also delighted at the refurbishment that's taken place at Aspire at Featherstone. The gym there it's had a facelift. We've removed 2 changing rooms and created a light and spacious gym with new equipment, and there'll also be a spinning studio, so that is looking really good. And likewise, more good news is that the Cabinet recently agreed proposals in principle for a replacement stadium at Thorns Park, which you know was damaged extensively by fire in February last year. We've carried out a huge public consultation on the proposals, and we're delighted that we can now move forward and bring some design options back to Cabinet. On the tourism front, we've drawn up a tourism recovery plan that will promote the recovery of business and communities in 2021 and lead to growth in job creation. And a second phase of the focus will be on the development and implementation of a destination management plan setting out the long-term strategic vision for the district's tourism activity. And with that, in February, the team received this first submission from the new digital editors, local residents sharing their passion for the district through articles, photography and sketches for inclusion in the new Experience Wakefield website. And also they welcomed a digital work placement for 24 media students from Wakefield College, and they became digital editors for a week, and through projects including film, photography and writing, the group introduced a young person's perspective, and they did some amazing work, which is also going to be featured on the new Experience Wakefield website. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I move my report.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mr. Spate. Are there any questions? There are some questions coming in. I've got Councillor Mrs. Angela Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Spate, wondering, we're very pleased that we've got the active inspired money for Ossett Cricket Club. Could you tell me what they're actually doing with that money, please?
I'll come back to you on the detail of that, Angela. I don't know the detail of every single application on the Active and Inspired. You know, we've got tens of them throughout the district, but most certainly I'll come back to you with some detail on that if you're not already aware of it.
Perhaps the deputy portfolio holder will be able to know, tell us, because after all, she is a local ward councillor in Ossett, so she'd know all the details if she was involved in it. So perhaps Lynn could tell us, please. Councillor Masterman.
These are questions to the portfolio holder, so I don't know whether Councillor Masterman do that. But if you can, Councillor Masterman, could you answer Councillor Taylor's request for answers to her questions off the council meeting, if you wouldn't mind, please? Councillor Spate, can I continue on with that with Councillor Maureen Tennant-King, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say myself and my 2 ward colleagues were invited to have a look round Aspire Featherstone prior to it opening to the general public when restrictions are lifted at the ribbon cutting ceremony last week. I'd just like to say what a fab job that has been achieved. It's light, bright and airy with brand spanking new equipment and modern technology. It will be an asset to Featherstone and the wider community, and I myself can't wait to use it. It's something to be proud of. Thank you for this facility. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Maureen Tennant-King. I did miss it. I thought you said a bad job, you said fab job, I think you said, David. Up next, I've got Councillor Graham Isherwood.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Mr. Mayor, sorry. I'd like to echo what Maureen Tennant-King's just said. We went up, I mean, as regular users at gym, as you can tell by my superb physical shape. It's absolutely a superb facility, and one that we've lobbied for a long, long time. I'm pleased it's now come to fruition. But apart from that, Jackie, I feel it'd be remiss of me if I didn't mention the Aspire in Pontefract. And actually, the small committee that actually started this off, when I was chairman of that particular scrutiny, we were asked to scrutinise for a no pool sports area. Matthew and Morley were one of them. Celia Laughlin, who unfortunately is leaving now, she was another one. The deputy leader was another one. And we visited site after site after site. And we came up with that one in Pontefract, and also suggested that we stood outside supermarkets collecting people's views on it. We went and visited all the relative pools. We went to Nottingley. Of course, don't think Councillor Gorman on council at that time. Well, I know he won't anyway. We met people in Nottingley, Castleford, Pontefract, and the outcome were all very, very positive. And a lot of hard work went into that 18 months in arriving at that solution. So on behalf of all those people that took part in that, I'd like to thank them as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Isherwood. If I can just come back to Councillor Taylor. Councillor Masterman has answered that, and in the meantime I have just tried to look up what's going on there, and she's quite right. It's upgrading facilities, changing facilities to encourage the children to take part in all sorts of sporting activities there. So I'm sure new changing rooms will be very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. To Councillor Nick Farmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Spate, to say that I'm disheartened, demotivated and disillusioned would be probably understatement of the year. I'm really, really pleased at all the different schemes that you're doing in Pontefract, the one you've done at Minthorpe, one you've done at the Featherstone Sports Centre. They're all coming together, but to say that the Ossett Town Hall is nothing else but an absolute shambles. 3 years ago, I believe now, that the Cabinet passed that there would be a £2 million refurbishment on Ossett Town Hall. And you promised, I looked up last night, and you promised me all the councillors in Ossett that in 2019, the summer of 2019, it will be finished. To say, after meeting after meeting after meeting, that we've had cancelled, we've had promises, we even had in January tenders going out, specific tenders going out, and had to be in for a specific date. The meeting was cancelled in January because the tenders, the people who were putting the tenders hadn't even put them in. So we're waiting for that. We're meant to have a meeting on Friday. That has now been cancelled. We've had every excuse in the book. It's now nearly, 3 years, and we seem to be progressing no further. The only excuse we've had is the fact is that we've not had bats in the clock tower. I'm absolutely appalled, and I feel so disillusioned and disheartened for the people of Ossett and the surrounding areas. And secondly, there was a press release yesterday about the Ossett club and the facilities down there. I'm not too sure it was a political stunt or whatever, but it was a picture of my fellow Labour councillor in Ossett, and I got the impression, and I'm sure Councillor Taylor got the impression that person was the only person involved in it. I was involved in that right from the start. I contacted and I had meeting after meeting with a gentleman called Bob Schofield there, and to say that at the end of the press release that the other two councillors were also involved in, but we didn't have the respect of having our names put on it. And if you've got a problem with our names, it is Taylor. That's Taylor, and I'm Farmer, and you can even put me down as EIEIO if you want. But to say that I'm anything but appalled by what's going on at Ossett Town Hall, I'm absolutely peak sick of it, to be honest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Nick. Can I come back, Mr. Mayor? First of all, the Ossett one, that Councillor Masterman attended there in that press release, she was there in the deputy capacity for the portfolio. She was not there in her capacity as the local councillors. And secondly, I'm really disappointed in you, Nick, about the Ossett Town Hall business. You know as much as I do what's been going on there. You have been attending meetings, as have I, and we've both expressed some disappointment there. And you also know that it's not within my portfolio. So I think asking the question as you just have is a little bit unfair, because you know exactly what has been happening, and you've just used this as a platform to get your point across, which of course many people do, so fine. But I am disappointed because you fully know what the circumstances are there, and you know how much the library is just another tenant in that building, and we have been pushing to very, very hard to get in. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spade. More questions or comments? Again, I'm going to remind you to keep the comment box, if you can, clear for who just put questions or comments on. I see or a queue in. I think that's the only questions or comments that we've got to make on that. So thank you very much, Councillor Mrs. Spade, for your report. Moving on to the next portfolio holder for the environment, communities and poverty, I'm going to call on Councillor Mrs. Cummins. Would you please introduce your report to the Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just a few comments on the report. Agenda page 1, I'd like to congratulate all those staff nominated for the Directorate's Pride Awards. They all deserve our thanks for all the good works that they do. Agenda page 52, the Big Feed Initiative, approved by the Recovery Board, has been extended to June the 21st to ensure that those who are isolated are getting a twice-weekly visit from some fantastic volunteers who not only deliver meals but ensure that the recipients are okay and have everything they need. And last week we delivered over 1,247 meals. Also, just to highlight that this week we've sent out around 18,000 vouchers for children on free school meals and those families who claim council tax credit for food, to cover food over the Easter holidays. Agenda page 52, the WF Connect has now received over 300 donations of laptops and tablets from residents and businesses. These going to the children of families who are struggling, and we've also provided, I'm pleased to say, 22 to children within Urban House to help them access education. Agenda page 57, I'd just like to say well done to the bereavement services on the excellent inspection. Two final points I'd like to make, but one of them is I want to say a massive, massive thank you to all our Litter Pick Hero volunteers across the district. We're having more and more people coming forward wanting to be heroes, and I think it's making a difference across our district. It's sad we have to do this, and we need to educate people not to drop litter. But that said, we've some fantastic volunteers now. I just want to put on record our thanks for the help that they're giving us. And finally, just a little story. I've always said our bin men are brilliant. But none more than the crew who were emptying bins along Peterson Road recently. They came across an elderly resident who sadly had fallen into the road, injuring his face quite badly. They alerted the emergency service and stayed with that resident, comforting him whilst the ambulance arrived to take him away, and I'd like to say a personal well done to the crew that did that. With that, I move my report, Mr. Mayor. Take any questions.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mrs. Cummins. A nice anecdotal little story there at the end. I would like to also add mine to the bereavement services who've done a fantastic job for us. I'm sure I'm going to be giving them a mayor says thanks over the next couple of weeks before I'm moved out of the play. I also got your message to say that you'll be leaving at 4 o'clock as well. Are there any questions or brief comments on Councillor Mrs. Cummins' report? No, because I'm reading through all the other things about saying backwards and forwards. Again, if you wouldn't mind, please just making it so that we have questions and comments in the text boxes, please. I see that Councillor Steve Tully has joined us though, and I'm going to Steve, were you here when we did the declarations of interest? I think you might need to declare an interest for later on about the NHS. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, I do believe I need. I shan't be here for the part of the debate. To be quite honest with you, Mr. Mayor, I find it appalling in actual fact that just because your other half happens to work in NHS, we can't participate in it when the leader of the Labour Party's wife's a nurse, and two prominent members of the Tory Party's wives are heavily involved in track and trace, and and some other misdemeanors have done within the party. But yeah, I'm aware of that, and I will declare an interest, and we're leaving the meeting at that stage.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. I don't make the rules, I just present the programme. So, any other comments on Councillor Mr. Cummings' portfolio report, please? I've got thanks Maureen from Councillor Graham Isherwood, and then I'm going to go on then to the next report. Is the portfolio holder for planning and highways, and I'm going to ask Councillor Morley to give your report to the full council, please. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think we've all agreed that we've suffered from one of the worst winters we've seen for many years now. We seem to have nothing more than extremely heavy rain, snow, and freezing ice throughout most of January and February. And I think most of us around the district has been travelling along. We've seen the impact on our district with the potholes appearing, in the weaknesses in the roads, and where utility companies have dug up. With that in mind, Mr. Mayor, I was pleased as a council we agreed to invest a further £100,000 in pothole repairs. Over the last, 4 to 5 weeks, Mr. Mayor, we've had teams out right across the district, and we've repaired somewhere in the region of 5,000 potholes, temporary repairs. That's given us the breathing space to now go out and repair them properly, Mr. Mayor. On top of that, we've also got the council's capital programme that was agreed last week at Cabinet. So we'll get on now repairing the district's roads as well. That report contains about £8 million worth of money. Sorry to say, though, Mr. Mayor, it's been well publicised, though, the government's put a 22% reduction in the allocation they give to Wakefield Council. So we're £1.5 million short of what we normally spend on highways repairs for this forthcoming years. But as a council, we'll get on and do the best we can for people around the district. So I just want to pay a huge thank you to all our staff within highway, street scene, and also the council's contact centre. They're the face of the council. They're the people that have to take the calls. Sometimes people who are quite upset and not happy, but they do a fantastic job, very professional, and I cannot thank them enough. Mr. Mayor, the government has launched its national bus strategy. I've been looking into the bus strategy, and the strategy is first and foremost an admission of years of failure. The deregulation of bus services pursued by the Thatcher government has led to massive falls in services, reliabilities and fare increasing way above inflation. Bus journeys outside of London have nearly halved since 1986, and the strategy itself notes services can be confusing, split between different companies, do not accept each other's tickets, and in some cases don't even acknowledge each other's existence. Mr. Mayor, what we really need is bus franchising, cross-ticketing and flat fares that will bring benefits to passengers. And personally, I think we all look forward to working with the new Mayor of West Yorkshire, leading on these once they're elected, and we can improving vital services for our towns, especially our remote towns and villages. I always say, Mr. Mayor, I think it's an absolute disgrace in this day and age. We have we have villages that are just sometimes a couple of miles from major metropolitan areas that are completely cut off. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I look forward to working with the Mayor. I think we all do on that. One final point I'd like to raise, Mr. Mayor, it was a pleasure a couple of weeks ago to arrange a meeting that was requested by Councillors Byford and Masterman about rail connectivity in Ossett and Albury. We had a meeting with the Chair of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority that proved a very useful meeting, and the campaign for a rail station somewhere in that area now is well on the agenda, and it's something we will be pursuing as a council. And I thank them both for raising this issue and this campaign to get better bus services in that area. It's also interesting to see that the MP for Wakefield has jumped on and supported this idea now, Mr. Mayor. I would question his thoughts on a monorail between Kergate and Westgate Station, Mr. May. It is something out an episode of The Simpsons when you start looking at it, the monorail episode. And we've seen across the world failed monorail projects. Mr. May, it's interesting the fact that for a monorail from them 2 stations, it's looking, and this is on a conservative estimate, looking to be somewhere in the region of £162 million just to build the monorail. That's without the stations at each end, and also the cost that cost businesses through disruption. So it is interesting, that one, Mr. Mayor. I look at it this way: the 162 million transport spending, it would actually purchase 15 brand new stations across this district. We could build new stations in Featherstone, Nottingley, Outwood, Pontefract and Sandal, just to name but a few. So I'd like to see the MP maybe rethink these terms. We already have good links between the stations. We have the Free City bus. You can catch a train from each station. So I think I'd really got on board with yourselves and have conversations with us about how we can get more funding into rail and rail stations around here. Just a thought on that one, Mr. Mayor. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Morley. And are there any questions or thoughts on Councillor Morley's report? I've got Councillor Nick Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, talking about the proposed rail station that's going to be at between Aubrey and Ossett. Obviously, I'd welcome that. Fantastic. I just wondered if you'd actually had any liaison with our MP and Councillor Simon Fishwick, who's over the last 12 to 15 months has been doing what I might say is a hell of a lot of work on that, talking to different people, talking to and finding out exactly the right place for it. Could you tell me how much you've actually dealt with Councillor Fishwick on this, please? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, doing so much work on it, I'm surprised he hasn't approached myself as a portfolio holder for planning, highways and transportation. The only people who'll be able to deliver on this is the West Yorkshire Combined Authority he'll be working with. So I think the answer would be, why hasn't he been to me to speak to me about it? Why didn't he come to me to arrange a meeting with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority? Has any meetings taken place with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority? The only people that's come to me is Councillors Masterman and Byford, who think this is an idea and want to pursue this. So I put the question to him, and he's here. He can speak for himself.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. We know how long ago did
this is a two-way conversation. This is question and answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I just come in there, Councillor Farmer? I've got obviously other people with questions. I'll let you finish off what you're saying, and then we're going to go on to Councillor Taylor in a moment.
I'd just like to know how long you've been thinking of this scheme, Councillor Morley.
Mr. Mayor, this is coming from Councillors Byford and Masterman. They're the local members. I'm there to support any member, regardless of political parties, Mr. Mayor. Anybody can come to me as a portfolio holder and I'll support them in any scheme they want to move forward. And they've come forward to me. Can I ask why Councillor Fishwick has not come to me and asked to set up a meeting with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority? And can Councillor Fishwick, who's in this meeting now, please tell me what meetings he's held with the Combined Authority? They are the ones who will pursue this. It will not be the Department of Transport. That's who will do this with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. When was their meetings take place?
No, you haven't answered the question, Councillor Morley. I asked you how long ago did you propose this scheme?
Mr. Mayor, we can go around in circles all day on this one.
Answer the question, Councillor. Answer the question. Answer the question.
Ask a question. No, let me just say. You go through the chair. Councillor Farmer, what you do, you ask the question and then you press mute. And then I ask you, invite you back into it. This is not a ding-dong. We haven't time for this. You've got a question to Councillor Morley. He's told you what he's been doing with it. He's told you it's the West Yorkshire Authority. He's asked Councillor Fishwick if he wants to come in and share any of his further information. I'm moving on now to Councillor Angela Taylor next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, Councillor Morley, I think you'll find that one of the reasons that people don't come to you is the same reason that ask Darren Byford how much he goes into Simon Fishwick's shop and asks what he's doing and what's this and what's that. And Simon Fishwick, because he's a nice bloke, tells him.
Question.
And what happens, he goes straight back, and he and Lynn Masterman have stolen it, and they've come to you. But that's why people don't. That's why people don't come to you, Matthew Morley.
Well, that's not a question.
and it's time we brought some order back into this meeting. There's questions to portfolio holders and the portfolio.
Steve, I'm not being funny. It's not your job. It's not your job to introduce order. So you don't need to butt in either.
Thank you. Thank you. Nobody needs to butt in. Can everybody put the mics back on mute, please, now? What I've said to you is this. You ask a comment or a question in the box. I don't want any more sarcastic comments written in the box about monorails and buttling. What I'm saying to you is you go through the chair. When I ask you to ask your question, you ask a question. If you want to make a comment, you make a comment. Please don't come on and then start stirring it up what he said, she said, because no, the rest of the council won't be that dramatically interested. What you want to do is to ask Councillor Morley a question, then go back onto mute. That is how we're going to continue on with this, or I'll draw an halt to it now. Now then, so we'll proceed with that. Councillor Taylor, I'm asking you to ask your question to Councillor Morley on his report, please. Take it from that we haven't got one.
No,
okay, so moving on.
I was putting my. You told us all to go on mute. I was coming off mute.
Right. You was coming off mute. Sorry. No, sorry you was coming off mute, but I'll take your question again, Councillor Taylor. Now.
Thank you. Could you tell me, Mr. Morley, or Councillor Morley, why you steal ideas from the Conservatives when they're working really hard and you're just thinking, oh, that's a good idea. I think we'll take that.
It's an inappropriate question because Councillor, I'll answer that without being politically biased. Has anybody else got a question?
Mayor, can I just come back there, please?
Of course you can.
Mr. Mayor, obviously, I've never seen anything as disrupted and disgraceful in my life, Mr. Mayor. But obviously, the Conservatives are not happy because they're completely showing their lack of support or direction for OSIT and the fact they haven't really raised this issue before. So I think I'll leave it there. And it'd be interesting to, for Simon Fishwick to come onto the mic and speak up for himself instead of other people.
What we'll do, Councillor Morley, you're quite right. What we're going to do is draw a veil over that in a moment. If you want to ask questions to Councillor Morley about his attitude of getting where he gets his ideas from, do it outside the council chamber, please. I'm moving on now to a comment by Kevin Swift.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to straightforwardly welcome Councillor Morley's report about the investigations into a new station or a reopened station at Horbury and South Ossett. Not just for the benefits that it would bring to the people of that area, which very definitely it would, but also because it might offer some hope of relieving the awful traffic conditions along Horbury Road, so that improvements for one area are not necessarily confined just to those communities. I think it's actually a project that is to be commended, with a great deal to be said for it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Quite rightly said, Councillor Swift there.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for that. I think you're quite right, and I think it's also one of these issues that it won't happen overnight. It will take many years of lobbying, campaigning, and meetings, but we will get there. And I do welcome what you're saying. I do think you're right about the congestions on Horbury Road as well.
I think you were also right, Councillor Morley, when you talked about the outlying districts and the connectivity. Choose whatever we use, buses or trains. It's the connectivity that's important to the outlying district. Are there any more questions or comments on Councillor Morley's report?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor Simon Fisher. Did you want me to make a comment, or is that are we now closing that case?
I think it would be best if you contacted Councillor Morley.
You can. Just be careful, though, gentlemen and ladies. Don't be calling me disruptive. I've kept very silently throughout this point. I can be disruptive, but I've chosen not to be. So
Thank you very much.
Let's please just simmer down, or I'll simmer it for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Fishwick. And no more questions for Councillor Morley or comments. I'm moving on then to the next report for portfolio order for regeneration and economic growth. And I'm going to call on Councillor Byron. Could you please introduce your report to Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I go on to move my report, I would like to say a big thank you to everybody in the Economic Development and Regeneration team for the help that they've given me over the past 12 months and to the help that they have given residents and businesses and other partners involved in the work that they have been doing, including on the Towns Fund, which I'll talk about shortly. Within the team, there are two distinct parts, and one part supports residents and one part supports business, while those both parts support the district. And whilst we've been supporting residents, over the past pandemic, we have seen a significant increase in complaints about private rental landlords. Officers from the strategic housing team have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic to offer support to those residents who really do need their help. We've also been supporting residents with our Big Heat Amnesty project, which is now live, and we are working our way through our first batch of referrals. Briefly, this very simple and effective scheme is designed to save people energy and protect them, because they will swap old and unsafe or faulty portable heaters for more efficient models to enable households to help with their heating needs. And our Money Smart and More Money in Their Pockets teams go from strength to strength, offering key help and support to everybody that needs it during the pandemic. Let's talk about the Towns Fund. Following our two amazingly successful bids, and the government department which has controlled this, which is HMCLG, tell us that our bids were good and well put together. We've now got two bids that we've been successful with, Castleford and Wakefield. And over the next 12 months, we have to do an amazing amount of hard work with the individual task forces to prepare two business models, which will enable the monies to be released. We haven't got that money yet. We're just part way down that journey. And I would like to thank the two task forces, all of the council officers, all of the businesses, everybody else involved in those schemes, especially the two MPs. But please also remember, and there was a press release on this yesterday, we have a wider investment budget for the rest of the district. A £10 million regeneration budget has been allocated for investment into urban areas across the district which are not identified with current master plans. And these involve South Hemswell and South Kirby, Hemsworth, Normanton, Featherstone. Councillor Taylor, I hope you hear me when I say Ossett, and I hope my fellow colleagues hear me when I say Horbury as well. We have started with a pilot scheme in South Kirby and South Hemswell and Moorthorpe, and that will be used as a model for rolling it out across the rest of the district over the next 1 to 5 years. We have also started to work with our 3 district MPs on the Levelling Up project that the government has announced. And to paraphrase the leader earlier on, we will take grant money from wherever it's available. And working on the master plan for Nottingley, we hope to be able to submit a good scheme for the Levelling Up Fund to get massive investment into Nottingley. We're also working with the MP for Hemsworth and that area for plans for Featherstone and the South East. And again, we will continue to work with the Wakefield MP for levelling up funds for more work in Wakefield. We've got, unfortunately, no plans as far as the Levelling Up Fund is concerned, which is a government scheme for the part of our ward that covers Morley and Outwood, as we've had no contact with the MP for that area. But I would also like to finish by reminding everybody that the other part of the portfolio includes adult education, our employment hubs, and our step up scheme. These 3 services are providing valuable and continued support to those in need as our workforce continues to change across the district because of the pandemic. We will work with local businesses, the BID, and individuals to offer help and support in their searches for new and to improve their employment prospects. At lunchtime today, we held a Wakefield question time on the city and town centres, where the leader and I were able to discuss plans for Wakefield and the 10 towns directly with members of the public. A great exercise in local democracy, very well attended, a good piece of public consultation, and very positively received.
Thank you.
And with that, Mr. Mayor, I move my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Byford. I've got a question from Councillor David Dagger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question to the Cabinet member on behalf of my constituent in relation to consultation on the proposed expansion of the gypsy and traveller accommodation at Heath Common. The Cabinet report states any proposal will be subject to consultation with the local and travelling community prior to planning process. When and how will the prior consultation take place? And in addition, will the Cabinet member agree to meet with the travelling community and the Parish Council on the intended proposals? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Byford?
Hardly a question on my report, Mr. Mayor, but I will answer it in this way. The planning consultation process is unlikely to start before late summer 2021. Currently, the council are undergoing land surveys, land ownership surveys and groundwork investigations are being carried out. But I can tell you that ward members will be engaged with prior to the planning consultation starting, and that is when we can decide the way forward for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Byford. Any more questions? I've got a question, a comment coming up from Samantha Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And great job, Darren, that you mentioned about democracy with the leader of the council for the consultation. But however, I am the portfolio holder, well, shadow, of course, you, for economic growth and regeneration. So I just wonder, if there is democracy extended to the general public, why can't you actually send me an email to invite me or to inform me of such consultation taking place? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Byford?
Whilst Councillor Harvey says that she's the shadow portfolio holder for economic development and growth, I did not know that we had shadow portfolio holders, but I'll gladly work with Sam where I feel it's appropriate.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dagger, I'm afraid you did say at the start of the thing we only get one bite of the cherry. So moving on now to a comment from Nadeem Ahmed. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to point out something to Councillor Byford, just so he's aware. I think Councillor Dagger asked him a question which he claimed that wasn't on the agenda. That it's been 2 or 3 years prior to that the agenda book rule was changed. So any member of any portfolio holder can be asked any question related to their portfolio. So I think he needs to also be aware of his own procedures that was agreed by the council in a significant amount of time, and be clear about that. So coming back to the question that Councillor Dagger asked him was the consultation process, which I don't think you've answered the question in there. So we need to come back to that question and realise that you as a portfolio holder can be asked any question related to your portfolio, whether it's in the book or not.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Byford?
Thank you for pointing that out to me.
Yeah, thank you. So, any more questions or comments for Councillor Byford on his report, please? If not, I'm going to move on to the final Cabinet member report. It's for the Portfolio for Resources. Can I call upon Councillor Michael Graham to please introduce your report to full council?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just like to mention 2 things in moving my report. First of all, I think every elected member in this meeting is aware that fast and reliable internet connection is absolutely vital for the residents across our district and for the businesses as well. And whilst we do have 95% of people in this country who have access to super fast broadband, I think we're also all aware that it's not everyone. A lot of work is going on, and there's a little bit of it in this report, behind the scenes, meetings taking place, looking to get everyone onto super fast. And I know the councils will be doing their own thing and looking at this across the country as well. Good news today is that we are now ready to launch one of our schemes, which is the Gigabit Voucher Scheme, which I have mentioned before. And this will offer £7,000 to businesses and £2,500 to residents to help them get the infrastructure and get connected to superfast in rural areas. So full details are due to be released. I know a press release is going out today. but we will keep a close eye on it. If it's really popular, we will be lobbying for more money for this. So keep an eye out for full details on that. Second of all, Mr. Mayor, I just want to mention, as we know, there's a roadmap that's being released to get out of lockdown. Feels like an absolute eternity since we all went into it, and I know we're all looking forward to getting out. But I just want to say a thank you to our council officers, because there has been a huge amount of work behind the scenes going into making sure that our buildings and our services are fit for purpose and they're ready to receive residents again across our 10 towns and our city centre, making sure that they're safe and COVID secure. And just, I suppose it's a plea really with everyone in the district. On April the 1st, that, as you'll be aware, people that have been shielding for the best part of a year will be re-entering public spaces, and it won't be obvious to all of us who these people are. And it's very much likely that some of these people will be feeling extremely anxious about coming out again. And every one of us across the district, elected members, everyone has a responsibility to be mindful about our actions, about observing social distancing, and about making space for people, wearing a face covering and hand washing regularly as well, which we know is important. So it's just a plea really to, although we have got this roadmap and we hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, we have still got to follow the rules. We have still got to be kind and be mindful and respectful of others when visiting council services and everywhere else really. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I will move my report and take any questions or comments.
I think, as we said yesterday, Michael, on the steps of the town hall, that I want the new normal to include all the good things from the old normal, bring it forward and blend it with all the things that we've learned to do over the last 12 months and create a new normal. And one of the things that we've done in this last 12 months is keep an eye out for each other and be a bit more civil to each other. So I'm looking forward to an improvement in that. But thank you for your report. I've got a comment from Councillor Graham Isherwood coming next. Done in the style of Marcel Marceau, obviously, but
no, I can't. No, it's this computer. It don't do as it's told, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to do with me. It's this stupid machine. I just want to make a plea, really, to Michael Graham. I've been on with this now for must be the best part of 10 years. If there's any chance of looking at Street House, which is in my ward, or our ward, should I say, the internet speed around the old Snidel area, well, you're quicker going on bus than trying to get an email sent. It's absolutely appalling. I thought recently when Virgin were digging out streets up that we may have a chance, but they're not even going to get opportunity of that neither. So if you could just bear them in mind when you're dishing whatever vouchers you are, it's old, it's not Snidel Villas Street House. I'll write it down for you anyway and send you it. So if you can give them some consideration, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Isherwood. Yes, a lovely part of the world, Snidel Villas as well. Councillor Graham, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, please, Mayor. Just to say, I know Councillor Isherwood and Councillor Tennant-King have contacted me several times about issues in their ward, and this is one of the ones that's included. I know they are constantly asking and fighting for solutions for the people down there who have that poor connection. Obviously, with this gigabit voucher scheme, there is a set of criteria. And I suppose you do have to look at how popular it is. If it's that nobody takes this up, we then have to expand that criteria. It may be that the people down there will match up to that already, depending on their postcodes. I don't know off the top of my head, of course. But what I can promise is that either through this voucher scheme or through one of our other schemes that will be coming forward very shortly, we will definitely do everything we can to assist those people in getting those super fast connections. And improving their quality of connection overall. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Michael. Fast will do. I'm not bothered about super fast. Fast will do.
So just your own time, he says. Can I have next up? We've got a question from Councillor Tom Gordon.
Hi, thanks. It was just a quick one, Councillor Graham. I know, gosh, I've just searched my emails quickly, and it was back in the summer of 2019. I raised with you in your, I forget exactly what the cabinet title was back then, internet connectivity issues for part of my ward on the Gleason's estate, which was built. I was just wondering, in terms of those gigabyte vouchers and schemes, with the developer and trying to sort of see what they can do and if they can get Openreach to work with them to help sort out about 100 properties on there which are using still copper wiring as opposed to fibre, and trying to push that along. I didn't know, in terms of when you mentioned the gigabit scheme, how will that work with sort of still relatively new developments, or is it specifically for rural areas, and is this something that you'd be able to sort of have a look into and sort of help take up, really? To make sure that residents, because there's sort of a quite strong sense of frustration on that particular development, even though it was in the I can't remember when it was built, it was when I was at uni, I think. The problem is that it was nodded through in planning, and they were able to put in technology that was just going out of date and sort of the transition over to fibre. And it's causing a lot of frustrations, particularly obviously with COVID and working from home, with people who bought houses less than 10 years ago as new builds who don't have access, and they keep seeing new housing developments being added to that particular development by Gleason's, who are getting the new fibre, and obviously it's seeing new people moving in and getting something that you haven't yet got, despite you being an early adopter, is causing a lot of frustrations down there. So I didn't know if this would be something that we could look at and try and sort of see if they would be eligible for that and how we'd go about that.
Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. I do remember this was something you raised in full council, and I can't remember the date myself, but you did raise it, and that was when I was the Cabinet Member for Skills, Digital and Technology Capabilities. I can't believe you forgot that title. It's such a catchy one. In terms of the sort of answer to this, I totally sympathise and agree, and I think I explained this back when you asked me. In terms of new builds, the council's planning department sort of don't have any powers to enforce this infrastructure. They can't force developers to put this in. They can suggest it and they can recommend it, and I think that's where the problem is. And you know, I definitely would welcome, it's not my area specifically, but I definitely welcome some national legislation to force this, because it makes no sense to build new houses with either no infrastructure or out of date infrastructure. It's not fair and it's not right. But so I can't promise anything from my area, but what I will definitely do, it's something that we're aware of, it's something I've raised several times, and I'll work with other cabinet members to see what we can do as a council and see what everyone else is doing to address this issue. I've got a strong suspicion there's no answer at the minute nationally, but let's look at everything that's possible.
Yeah, probably planning and building of new houses. That's when it ought to be planned in. Well said there. Have we got any more questions or comments to Councillor Michael Graham? If not, Councillor Graham, thank you very much for your report, and that concludes the Cabinet members' reports for today. What we're going to do next is turn that on, and then what we're going to do is to say agenda item 9 is to deal with any questions made by the members. No questions have been submitted. So that means the final agenda item, therefore today, is to deal with any motions proposed by members. 5 motions have been received and are set out in the council summons. I'll take the motions in the order in which they appear on that agenda. And so I'm going to call on Councillor Hemingway. As your motion appears first on the council summons, would you please move your motion to council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to bring this motion to council on this important topic. When the council declared a climate emergency back in May 2019, we erred possibly in one respect by not placing greater emphasis on the biodiversity crisis in its own right. And when we talk about biodiversity, we mean the variety and wealth of nature and species in a given area. It's an important metric to judge how healthy the natural world is, and it's absolutely crucial for the continuation of life as we know it. There is now an overwhelming body of scientific evidence showing a decline in biodiversity in almost every part of the natural world since the 1970s. And while the loss is likely to have started much earlier than that. The pace of species decline, habitat loss, exploitation of the natural world has only accelerated since then. And if colleagues were able to see David Attenborough's recent documentary on extinction, some of the findings and the images in there were absolutely appalling. It's not just an international problem for rainforest loggers, ocean trawlers, Canadian tar sands. The destruction of nature is happening right here on our doorsteps. The 2019 State of Nature report showed that here in the UK, 41% of species are now in decline, 1 in 10 are now endangered, and 2% of species have actually become extinct. Animals that our ancestors may have heard and seen in English forests and meadows 1,000 years ago are being lost. And it's a tragedy, and more than a tragedy, it's a crisis. It's absolutely linked to climate change and human activity. Warming climates replace the conditions animals and plants have evolved in, but it's also a wider issue than that. The encroachment of urban development destroys habitats, and unsustainable business practices impoverish soils and deplete finite resources. Nature has sadly also been neglected as a government priority, with £250 million of government wildlife funding being cut over the last 10 years. We can do more as a country and as a district, and we have to do more if we want to sustain our current way of life. The Disgust review of earlier this year showed that our economy is dependent on having a certain level of biodiversity. The most obvious example of decline is the much-loved honeybee, which has declined by as much as 50% since 1970. And if we continue to lose pollinator species, our crops and fruits will eventually fail, and human society will begin to unravel. The whole ecosystem is connected, and a loss at one level impacts up the chain. The evidence is absolutely compelling, and the need for action on this topic is great. The government's environment bill will make a difference, but it has been delayed yet again. Here in Wakefield, we are ahead of the curve in some respects, and we're already looking at biodiversity net gain in planning development. We're expanding our wildflower verges and planting new forests, creating new parkland. We are starting to make homes for nature once again. But we need to go further and faster than that. We need to be more strategic and join up the good work of community groups, volunteers, and the council into clear overall plans. That's why it's so important that we make this declaration today, a statement of the recognition of crisis in nature, and also for us as a council to commit very publicly to a proper plan for nature recovery within our district. We've placed a real priority on climate and the environment over the last 2 years, and these plans will eventually begin to bear fruit later this year. But if we're serious about being an environment and nature-friendly district, we need to take this further step. I hope members will support the motion to declare a biodiversity emergency today and allow us to take this agenda forward as a council. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hemingway, for proposing the motion. Is the motion seconded?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. In seconding the motion, do you wish to formally speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
I'll just say a few words. I think that not only is the resolution very comprehensive, but also Councillor Hemingway has spoken at length about the whole subject. I think that particularly during the lockdown, people have really appreciated nature and the birds singing and being able to walk, and for many it's been their only outings, and I think that we've got to appreciate and acknowledge that and realise how important it is to us all. So what I would just like to comment on is, first of all, Councillor Hemingway has already alluded to the government priority to put money into this project and then cut it by 250 million over the last 10 years. So we need somehow to urge government to start taking it more seriously. The Environment Bill will make a difference, but it's being delayed again, which is what we see in social services as well. We really need legislation like this to go through. And I think finally, Councillor Hemingway's last comment in his report said, "We all have our part to play, and winning over hearts and minds will be a key task as we embark upon this very challenging journey towards a net zero-led economy and society. And I think that's what's important to us, that we've got to get it right. We've got to get it right for ourselves and our children. And I really hope that everybody will support this resolution. I think it's a really good one. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rowley. Now going to open up the debate. And we're going to, well, before we do that, Councillor Harvey has submitted an amendment to the motion. The amendment has been circulated to members prior to the meeting. Councillor Mrs. Harvey, would you please like to introduce your amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to pass on my thanks for all the work you have done for the last whole 2 years through this very difficult time. And I hope everyone is keeping well as well 1 year after the first lockdown. And now you can count for the 5 minutes. So thank you to Councillor Hemingway for the points in the original motion. I'd like to add to some of these and more clearly define ways in which we can protect our environment instead of giving general statements. Rather than declaring another emergency, I think we should add additional clauses to our existing climate change action plan. As Councillor Hemingway has stated, there is a clear link between climate change and biodiversity loss. So why we must declare these separately when they fall under the same scope? Many species within our region are integral to our agricultural processes, and a loss of pollinators due to pesticides will have a devastating effect on the crops which we are able to grow in our region. We must therefore ensure that we are not using chemicals on our crops which cause loss of biodiversity. When the River Calder last flooded between Doncaster Road and Ferry Lane, it brought a large amount of rubbish to the surface which had previously been washed to the bottom of the river bed. This left the trees surrounding the river strewn in years of waste, which was never cleaned properly. The presence of this waste causes significant damage to the aquatic wildlife which could thrive in the river, as well as the wildlife which would roost in the surrounding trees. There has also been an overwhelming smell of sewage since this occurrence, which negatively affects the area as wildlife will be unable to set up habitats and residents will not want to walk through the area because of smell. I propose an immediate action from this council to deal with this failure. Yes, we need to renew our existing biodiversity strategy so it is more suited for our current times. But let's also take some immediate actions, some quick wins to improve our environment right now. Firstly, I propose that we install more bins in our green spaces, as the presence of plastic waste is one of the worst causes of loss to biodiversity. Plastic bags can lead to animals suffocating, and when it rains, toxins can leach into the environment, leading whole areas of our green for wildlife. Sitting on the Council's Planning Committee, I have noticed that almost every planning application has some comments about bats from the Environment Agency. We already know lighting is a significant concern in developments, as it has a detrimental effect on the bats in the area. We have these specific considerations to protect bats, but so we must do the same for all other wildlife in our district. Next, all planning proposals within our green belt should have to undergo full ecological surveys. It is no longer enough to aim for zero net loss to biodiversity, where we allow developments in largely wild or agricultural land. We should be working towards a net gain in biodiversity in these areas to protect our natural environment. Finally, I propose that as a district, we protect more trees with TPO orders and ensure that legal action can be taken against anyone who breaks them. I remember recently the local upset caused by one individual removed protected trees without permission and faced no consequences. These trees take many years to grow, providing food and habitat for our local wildlife. It is important that we allow this to thrive. The amendment itself, we need to think about the government environmental bill has been published. The draft recently contains clauses about the net gain of biodiversity and ways which we can all improve wildlife habitats. With this bill from the central government and our local council pre-existing climate change action plan, I feel it is unnecessary to declare another emergency as a separate instance, and instead we should work with what we have got in place and ensure that biodiversity loss is stopped and then steps for taken to reverse it. Another very important point I have to point out to this council is we must consider, is it in regards to the local developments? If we declare this biodiversity loss emergency at this time, what will we lose out on as a district? Will we have to hold development of housing until we come up with strategies to protect species? Will we have to pause construction of sites which have already received planning permission? As we form a new West Yorkshire Authority, we need to be sure that declaring emergency will not cause us to lose out on anything in Wakefield. To conclude, I'd like to quote Frans Lanting, a Dutch National Geographical speaker. Biodiversity starts in the distant past and it points towards the future. I think it's now the time for us to treat biodiversity loss seriously and start to evaluate, review, and draw up some action plan before we commit to yet another headline-grabbing stunt. I hope we can all pledge to push these sensible and practical changes and vote for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Harvey, in proposing your amendment. I'm going to ask, is the amendment seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cruz, for coming in there, because I have you down as being the seconder. You wish to formally speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
I'll speak now, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
That's okay then, Councillor Cruz, the floor is yours.
Right, I would like to speak to support Councillor Harvey's amendment to the motion which she has just proposed. I agree with the points which she has laid out and believe they will be the best way to improve our ecosystems. I'd like to make a few points that I'm concerned about, and I would like to see that we have strict clauses in future planning applications to ensure the safe relocation of wildlife where possible. And I would also like developers and contractors to be held accountable if they breach these contracts. I know of somebody, a developer who took a great big chainsaw to a hedge that was all around the building site just because they wanted better access, and they did that right in the middle of nesting season. And that's out of order, and these are the issues that we need to be addressing if we're going to tackle biodiversity problems. Our council has consistently overachieved on national housing targets. Does this council feel that this was the wrong decision to make if it has this is now a large factor in why we want to declare an emergency level? We have also stated that overall the air quality in the district is good, and we recognise pollution as one of the contributing factors causing loss of biodiversity. Considering that these two factors already contradict each other, are we sure now that is the right time to be declaring a crisis when we cannot be sure what the effect has been on our natural environments without conducting ecological surveys? With these points, I agree with Councillor Harvey that now is not the right time to be declaring an emergency, as we do not know what the effects of this declaration could be as we elect a new mayor for West Yorkshire. We have no idea where we will come into that just yet. Now, and also, I'd like to make a point, and I think it's quite an important one, that since the previous budget meeting 1 month ago did not contain any comments or anything about funding to prevent biodiversity loss, why all of a sudden has this appeared out of nowhere that it's so bad that we have to declare an emergency situation? I am very concerned at the sudden appearance of this, and I do hope that it isn't electioneering. Thank you for your time, and I hope we can all agree to push Councillor Harvey's amendment through. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cruz. Now then, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to ask any member to speak. I've got a couple of people who've got comments already, but I can remind you once again that any member may speak only once on the motion and once on the amendment, or to raise a point of order or a point of clarification is of right of reply. I'm going to ask the members if you want to speak on the amendment, and I've got a comment first of all coming from Councillor Kevin Swift.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It relates to the amendment. I find very little to disagree with in the details of what both Councillor Harvey and Councillor Cruz have said. But I think I would draw the attention of Council to the section of Councillor Hemingway's motion, which says that we would wish to review the existing biodiversity strategy. And I actually think that that's the place for some of the suggestions that have been made. The full council meeting is not really the place to sort out whether putting more bins in rural locations is or is not the right way to do things. I use that because I know full well that on that issue, there's more than one opinion. There are people who say, yes, it's a good idea, and there are people who say, no, it's not. All you end up with is a pile of people's rubbish all round it, when what we should actually be saying is take your rubbish home. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I am saying that to deal with the detail of that, or the detail of how to deal with irresponsible developers ripping out hedges, as Councillor Cruz mentioned, I think that getting the practical details of those kind of things right, that the right place and time is actually within the context of doing an update, a full update of the Council's biodiversity strategy, rather than actually the amendment that's passed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Swift. Next comment is coming on the amendment from Councillor Jack Hemingway.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome Councillor Harvey and Cruz's interest in this topic and the comments on the original motion earlier, but I must admit to being somewhat perplexed by the Conservative amendment. I mean, we're used by now to receiving amendments of varying quality from the opposition bench, but frankly, this one seems to bloat the original motion with a waffling collection of very specific operational suggestions. And these are suggestions and ideas which, for the most part, the Council is already doing, and which seem unnecessary to state again in an amendment. Although, as Councillor Swift stated, I'm always happy to take on board new ideas and suggestions that could help with this issue, so very much welcome that if there is anything constructive the Conservatives want to add. But I believe in this case, not only does the amendment add nothing of substance, but by altering the biodiversity emergency motion to not declaring a biodiversity emergency, it smacks to me of a wrecking amendment in spirit, at least, not if literally. It is disappointing that the Conservatives appear to be using this amendment as a fig leaf to disguise the fact that they don't think political priority. I mean, we have already said what the attitude of national government is to this important agenda, but it's a shame that the local Conservatives don't want to declare an emergency either. I think, in summary, the truth is the amendment adds nothing to the well-reasoned, evidence-based original motion, but only detracts from it, and on that basis I would encourage colleagues to reject it.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hemingway. Councillor Harvey, I've got you down as a comment, but I'm going to come back to you as mover of the amendment, in which you can speak on that at the end. Is there any more comments on the amendment? Not on the motion, on the amendment. Any other person want to speak on the amendment? Please indicate now. Okay, then we've had enough of that for questions and comments. Councillor Cruz, I'm going to come back to Councillor Harvey now to sum up. Councillor Harvey, as mover of the amendment, do you wish to reply before we take the amendment to the vote? In exerting your right to reply, may I remind you that no new matter can be introduced.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel that the Council should now start to think what we do here is not just to pay the lip service. At the moment, we have so many issues in relation to wildlife, to climate change, to all what Councillor Hemingway has acknowledged, but just to sweep the issues we're having under the carpet to say that the Calder River does not smell, does not need treatment, just to say that the rural area, like Councillor Swift said, is not a concern, or the plastic bags or plastic waste in New Miller Dam overflow every single day cannot be dealt with, and it does not affect our environment or our biodiversity loss. And that's not true. That's you are in denial. If we can do anything, can we start from home? Can we start from Wakefield? Can we think about here first and then truly review the situation where we are at, okay? And then we can see what we can do to contribute to the big picture of biodiversity issues in the country or globally. And we know that it is an issue dear to our heart, but we need to understand the issue. We need to really dissect it and see where we have done right or where we have done wrong. And like Councillor Julian, Cruz said, hey, how come magically there is an emergency come through? And well, I have the council book of the number 6 council book here right in front of me, has not even said anything. And a portfolio holder for climate change, Councillor Hemingway, there's not even one word of biodiversity in your budget report. How could that suddenly come out to be the emergency we need to declare now and here and now? We need to work on it, and then we understand when it's the best time to do it. So with that, I really hope that this is a time now we need to be the problem solver. We can't just playing the lip service all the time. Actions speak louder. Can we please support this one? Not because it's coming from the opposite bench. It's because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Jack, you've come up with a...
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a point of clarification. Just to say, I did mention biodiversity in my budget speech. I mentioned biodiversity and nature recovery in many of the speeches, briefings, meetings that I do as cabinet member for this issue. So I just want to clarify that it has not just appeared from nowhere. This has been something that we've been working on actively for a number of years, and I completely reject Councillor Harvey's assertion that I've not mentioned this previously.
Okay, thank you for that point of clarification. I'm now going to take the amendment to the vote, if you will. This is to clarify. This is to determine whether the amendment from Councillor Mrs Harvey should become the new substantive motion. I will ask each political group in turn before asking the Liberal Democrat and Independent member whether they wish to vote for or against the amendment or whether they wish to abstain. So firstly, with you've got your microphones on mute, but you can turn them on for me in a moment. Firstly, I'm asking the Labour group only, the Labour group members only. Please turn your microphones on and state clearly if you wish to vote for the amendment or abstain. Do you want to speak? I thought we were having silence. This is not what this says. So, stop it. Turn it all off. Turn it all off. Turn it all off. I'm reading off the script here. What we're going to do is that if anybody in the Labour group wishes to vote against or abstain from the amendment, voting for it, you leave your microphone on. What? So, I'm taking that silence to mean that the controlling Labour group members all wish to vote against the amendment, yes? Okay. No members of the controlling group have voted for the amendment or have abstained. I will take this that all the members of the controlling Labour group are against the amendment. If you are for the amendment, you speak now. Okay. I will take your silence as confirmation, if not, indicate then. So we're going to go on now to the Conservative group. Please turn on your phones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the amendment or if you want to abstain. Again, I think we're going to get Al round here if you wanted to do that. So what I'm going to ask you to do is only speak if you wish to vote against the amendment or to abstain. This is for the Conservative group, please. No members of the Conservative group have voted against the amendment. I will take it that all the members of the Conservative group are in favour of the amendment. If not, please speak now. Okay. I'm moving on now to ask the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon. Would you please turn on your microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote for, against, or abstain on the amendment?
Against.
Okay. Have I got Councillor Womersley? Is he with us? He's absent.
Apologies,
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah. So on that, then it looks like the amendment now falls, and we will revert back to the original motion. The debate on the amendment has covered many points. However, does any member wish to speak on the motion? May I remind members that speakers must be directed to the question under the discussion or to a personal explanation or point of order, and no speech may exceed 5 minutes. Does anybody want to make a comment or speak on the original motion now that becomes substantive motion? But Councillor Prestwick has lost his signal. I'm going on to Councillor Michael Graham for a comment.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to make the point that I think the leaders of this council and the deputy leader, since they've taken over, have got really clear aspirations to make our parks and green spaces the very best they can be for the residents of this district. And I think what this motion's doing is making it the best places they can possibly be for the insects, the animals in there, the wildlife. So I can't welcome it anymore. I'm also happy to see that it'll ensure that we're renewing the strategy on a regular basis. There's lots of strategies that sit behind closed doors in offices and we never do anything with them. It's nice to see that we're going to be keeping this fresh in everyone's minds, and we're going to be consulting with people. I think the amendment's gone. I'm not talking to the amendment, but Councillor Harvey did mention about not paying lip service to things. If you look at the work that Councillor Hemingway is doing, if you look at what he got in his report, the briefings he's putting on to push forward our climate change agenda and to address this issue, it's absolutely outstanding. And I think if anyone accuses anyone of paying lip service, they need to take the head out of the sand. So fully support this motion, and I'm happy it's going through. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. I'm on to next to Councillor Gillian Cruz.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to make a quick comment. In Councillor Hemingway's motion, it does say to implement our proposed biodiversity net gain policy to ensure planning development is sustainable and not exasperating the crisis. Well, I'd just like to make a comment to Council that I can't stress personally how important I think it is that we need to address planning applications and get that clause in there that they have to address and that we have to look after wildlife. It has to be in the planning application that contractors, developers and the council, that we all work together before a development can take place to relocate wildlife wherever possible. And I'd like to see us work on that as a council to put that into our regulations. I think that's a brilliant and fast way to move forward with this if we want to address biodiversity. There's a lot of planning and a lot of housing developments going on, and I've seen it myself where they just don't take any notice. We have to be strict and it has to be put down in writing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cruz. Good point. Moving on next to Councillor Tom Gordon.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree completely with the motion. I think one of the things, I suppose Gillian's just stolen largely what I was going to say there, just in terms of one of the things that is of concern to me is the fact that the Nottingham Master Plan would seek, if it goes through and the government basically can let us change the Greenbelt area, build houses across there. And I know one of the things that I do appreciate, and I know when I've had meetings and we've met with Councillor Byford and such, and we've talked over what this would look like, and when we've had ward meetings as well, that the entire purpose of any new housing that will be built will be done in a green way, looking to make sure that there are parks, green spaces, and sort of the fact that developers are meant to sort of take into account with that, with the sort of the code and whatever, I can't remember the exact phrase what it is, but basically how the housing's all got to a certain spec and standard, and same with across different plots of land and development. Again, it is just really, are we not sort of, whilst we can do this as a council, we can declare this emergency and we can say we want to look at how we're going to develop and make sure that we do that. Fundamentally, is this all going to fall a little bit flat if developers don't live up to their end? I know, again, with other developments around my area, we're meant to see landscaping and things done, and quite often this then ends up the thing that sort of drops and doesn't end up coming to fruition. It's also one of the things that I just find slightly odd. So, for instance, in my patch on one of the newish housing estates, is residents are actually prohibited as part of a covenant and terms of their conditions and when they bought the land and on that development, that they can't put in hedges of a certain height and they can't plant certain trees. So I think it's not just in terms of planning, but also looking at what any covenants or what sort of long-term sort of implications that when we're building new developments and making sure that there's a sort of cohesive approach through that. Overall, I do support it, but I do think actually some of the amendment suggestions from the Conservative amendment would have been useful to it, but with the fact that there was obviously stuff in there which was a little bit beyond the pale really and did over politicise it, was why I didn't vote for it. But overall, I think obviously it is aspirational and it is moving us in the right direction as a council. But I just, in terms of, again, I think the point is if this is something that we knew was coming and we know well it is something that's been coming down the tracks and it's not a surprise that we're seeing loss of biodiversity, then we could have done more. And particularly looking back to the last meeting, which was Budget Council, we could have done more, and it's just a little bit disappointing that we didn't.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gordon. We're moving on next to Councillor Simon Fishwick for a comment.
Good afternoon, everybody. Fantastic points have just been made, so congratulations on all that. What does worry me for Wakefield is City Fields. Obviously, that's quite a large area, but not only has that area been affected intensively, we've also got planning permission has been passed now for an open cast quarry down at the bottom end of Wakefield off Ferry Lane. Surely, if we're going to pass an emergency bill through, we should look to getting that decision for this quarry overturned. Should we talk about air pollution and quality control and the highways, the roads, before we could start talking about the animals, etc., this should be looked at first and foremost, and we should also knock this back straight away. And mean as we are going to go on and go forward with this, I'd welcome the comments from anybody who could say we'll look into this extensively with a quarry and have it knocked back. I think we could really rubber stamp this and get something behind it. Any thoughts on this, please?
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Fishwick. I'm going on to next for a comment from Councillor Harabi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 points to clarify. The first one is the review has been left in the amendment and it has not been contested, but we also need to take immediate action to improve rather than just declare emergency, because at the end of the day, we'll be judged by the residents for what we have done than what we have said or how many urgency or emergency we have declared. The second point is the last council book, agenda page 49 to 53, that's a directory for the climate change. There is not even one word of biodiversity loss or anything of such. So I was correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Samantha Narby. I've no more comments, no more questions on the original report, or the original motion. And so what I'm going to do now is take that once again to the vote, if you don't mind. And what we're going to say is, once again, I'll be taking each political group in turn.
Mr. Mayor, I pick up where the right.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, I do. Yes. Sorry, Councillor Hemingway, you're quite rightly so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You've got the right to reply as mover of the motion. And in exercising your right, may I remind you that no new matter can be introduced. Councillor Hemingway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I don't want to go back and forth with Councillor Harvey, but I refuse to accept that this hasn't been mentioned before, and I'm happy to point out the occasions where it has been mentioned to her in another time, and I'll send an email to her with the details of that. But in bringing the debate to a close, I just want to emphasise how important it is that we take this step today and declare a biodiversity emergency as a council. We've got a responsibility to future generations to do our bit and commit to do our part as a public authority. I think that it's been a good debate. Colleagues are right about planning, and we will do what we can locally with our new net gain policy. But if we're clear about this, we do need firmer powers and support from national government on planning specifically. Councillors here in this chamber are well aware that planning applications have to be determined on their own merits as part of a national framework, And while we can implement our own policies and shape that, we cannot overrule the fundamentals of planning policy. So it's the government that would really need to straighten up planning application procedures. And just on that point as well, let's all hope that the planning white paper doesn't pass, which would make it even easier for people to build on greenbelt land. But it's important to emphasise this isn't just lip service, as earlier comments have been made. It's about a clear commitment, creating a sense of urgency, and for Wakefield to look seriously at nature recovery. I think it was Councillor Graham that said, we're improving parks for our people, but let's make them homes for nature as well and improve them for nature too. So we're going to be looking to do that if this motion passes, and I hope it receives cross-party support.
Thank you very much for Councillor Hemingway. So what we're going to do then now is do what I was going to do a few moments ago and move on to take a vote on this motion before Council. Once again, I will be asking each political group in turn, and firstly, the controlling Labour group members only, please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or to abstain. That's the only time we want you to speak. As no member of the controlling group have voted against the motion or have abstained, I will take that the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the motion. If not, speak now, or I will take your silence as confirmation of that. Thank you very much. You can put your mics back on mute for me, please. And we'll now move on to the Conservative group. Please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote for the motion or if you wish to abstain. So let the Conservative group only, please turn on your microphones and speak now if you want to vote for or abstain against the motion. As no members of the Conservative group have voted for the motion, I will take that all the members of the Conservative group are against the motion. I will take your silence as confirmation of that. If not, please indicate now. Okay, thank you. If you can bob your mics back on mute for me now. And I will take now the final one to ask the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon, could you please turn on your microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote for, against or abstain on the motion? For. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Gordon. And I take it from that, I'm just waiting for the thumbs up, that the motion is carried. So that one is okay. Councillor Hemingway's original motion was carried. We're going to move on to the second motion now, and this is from Councillor Jones. Would you please move your motion to Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to bring this motion to Council at this crucial time in the lives of young people. I think it's true to say most of us are born with hope and a hope to succeed at school, a hope that we are able to leave school with well-earned qualifications which will help us choose the path we wish to follow, whatever it might be. All those possibilities and opportunities are the factors that motivate us to do well so we can fulfil those aspirations that we have been encouraged to have. But what happens if something catastrophic occurs, that the seamless journey we have through childhood, hopefully, and education is broken, that the plans and hopes we have all are thrown in the air? Yes, I'm referring to the generation COVID. That's the term that's being used to describe the pupils and students who are presently caught in the present examination qualification period of their lives. In the next few years, we must not overlook the needs of young people. A survey last year by the British Science Association identified that 90% of the 14 to 18-year-olds did not feel that scientists or politicians, Westminster ones, were talking to them when discussing COVID-19. Interestingly, the Prime Minister of Norway and New Zealand have actually held press conferences specifically for young people. And that adds to the feelings of young people, particularly as they do also get infected. Young people have many of the same pandemic-induced anxieties that older people have, and added to that has been the impact of lockdown, lack of socialising opportunities in person. The most recent unemployment figures disproportionately impact on those up to the age of 25. So what are the key issues affecting young people? Young Minds did a survey and identified some of the following. I'm anxious about school. My mood is low because of bad news. I'm anxious about all the changes, struggling with self-isolation, social distancing. I've lost loved ones due to coronavirus. We have to support our children and young people to ensure that they come out of this dreadful period. Previous pandemics have not been over in a year, so I'm calling for a much longer term plan and investment. In the short time, I'm pleased to say our authority has put resources into schools specifically produced during this period, and this has included COVID advice for schools on transition and back to school, advice for schools particularly over loss and bereavement, a recovery curriculum guidance, and emotional health and well-being for both staff and students. But we've got to go further now because we need a longer term strategy, as I say, and one that is broad and imaginative. As the government has said, young people have been uniquely impacted by the pandemic lockdown, with NHS research suggesting 1 in 6 may now have a mental health problem, which is up from 1 in 9 in 2017. So far, 79 million has been allocated, but given what it is listed in that allocation, it's mere window shopping and needs to go much deeper. In fact, the 79 million is part of the 500 million which has been allocated for mental health issues, so it's not new or additional money. In other words, 16% has been allocated for children and young people's mental health and well-being. Another lesson that's been learned from this period is that persistent poverty creates low self-esteem, high levels of mental health, and amongst the BAME communities, low self-concept. Anne Longfield, who has recently stepped down as a Children's Commissioner, has called for mental health counsellors in all schools. She also stated it's important to help young people rebuild social bonds. And when we talk about recovery, because I don't like the term catch-up, it should not be a heavy reliance on academic studies. The Institute of Fiscal Studies has also warned that 20% of parents fear that their child will take a year or more to recover, and this in itself adds greater pressure on children. The LGA, Children and Young People's Board, reported that the pandemic has exacerbated existing mental health problems, particularly in families with low incomes and those parents who may be experiencing financial difficulties. It's clear that our council, like others, along with the government, have a vital role in helping children have mentally healthy childhoods and mental health needs, and they have to be at the centre of a broad strategy. We have to ensure that the government understands that the right resources are in place to ensure mental health and wellbeing services and statutory mental health services for children are able to meet existing, new and unmet demands that has built up during the last 12 months. But it isn't just that. I've seen some great work by our youth teams on the ground who've been engaging with young people. We need to ensure we engage with young people when they're out and about in the community, and that means that we have a fully funded youth service again, and which is particularly pleasing with regards to the introduction of the youth hubs, which was mentioned earlier. Finally, I believe young people will expect to be heard, be respected, and expect to hold our leaders accountable for higher standards. If our young people cannot enter the labour market, they lose their skills and their faith, first in themselves and then in the system. Mental health strategies and support needs to be at the heart of a holistic approach to recovery to ensure learning and training opportunities to fulfil potential and employment prospects are in place and that they are underpinned by social inclusion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jones, in moving the motion to council. Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mrs. Isherwood. In seconding the motion, do you wish to formally speak now or reserve the right to speak until later in the debate?
I'll formally speak now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Isherwood, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I fully support this motion. Last year, we saw an increase in demand for mental health services and support. The demand was already high, and the many challenges that young people have faced during the pandemic has further exacerbated the pressures on the delivery of services. Young people have been impacted by the disruption of their education. Many have been impacted by the grief of losing a loved one, and they all face that struggle of rebuilding a normal life. The COVID pandemic has brought into sharp focus the need for high quality support and provision in relation to the mental health and emotional well-being of children and young people. And whilst this need has always been there, this has been considerably increased by the pandemic. In Wakefield, we have an excellent educational psychology team, and they provide a range of support, including input into education, health and care plans, traded work with schools, and additional core functions such as responding to critical incidents and support around loss and bereavement. Emotional health and well-being is at the core of educational psychologists' work. They work to provide support and advice to schools when children and young people have experienced loss and bereavement. The teams work collaboratively with other relevant services such as Wakefield Children's Safeguarding Partnership, CAMS and Public Health England to ensure effective working for emotional well-being and mental health. This is a key priority for the district and is now firmly embedded in the Wakefield Families Together model. The work being done is excellent, but if additional resources were available, the remit of the team could continue to be extended in order to effectively reduce the impact of COVID on children and young people. As my colleague had stated, young people will expect to be heard and we will listen, but we will need to have the right strategies and support in place in order to ensure the problems young people identify can be dealt with and also ensure our children can fulfil their true potential. Children are and must be at the heart of everything we do. And so, Mr. Mayor, I support this motion.
Thank you for that. In seconding the motion, Councillor Isherwood, I've got some comments already come up, but as you can see, we've posted on there. You can please refrain from giving us comments other than the questions or comments. We can then get through to the people who want to make those questions or comments rather than having to read on the phone. So we're going to go first off to Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 4th and 5th of March, I attended the Mental Health First Aider course for children and young people, run by Sarah Henry in connection with the Wakefield Safeguarding Children's Partnership. The course was face-to-face in a COVID-safe environment, and it was interesting to see and hear first-hand experiences from school teachers and social care support workers. Over the last 2 years, Sarah has trained 159 people across the district to become mental health first aiders for children and young people, and this figure keeps growing. The West Yorkshire Liaison and Diversion Team have recently commissioned Sarah to deliver 4 cohorts of mental health first aid so that all the staff who work in custody and courts with children and young people in this service will be trained responders. I think this is excellent and a powerful strategy to support children in crisis. The Wakefield Safeguarding Children's Partnership originally brought Sarah in to provide 3 cohorts of mental health first aid training, and 48 first aiders have now completed this course, with the majority of these being from schools. I praise all volunteers who have undertaken this training and who are supporting children and young people's mental health. I therefore fully support this motion to call on central government for an appropriate financial plan to support vital mental health services for children and young people. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carrington. I'm moving on next to Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think in overall, from what I've heard from Councillor Jones, I know he's got an educational background, and what I've seen in the motion are 2 different things. And I think had what you've said actually been presented in the motion, I would have been fully in support of the motion. Whilst, as he'll know as well, I've got an educational background, I've dealt with CAMS, and for a number of years. And is it a perfect system? It's not. And there is difficulties that parents face trying to get referrals, who does the referral, how they do that, and that creates issues. And I think all what COVID has done is probably highlight issues that were already existing within the service. And there's been a number of changes at national level within Ofsted frameworks, within curriculum changes with PHSE and other aspects within schools and academies, which have meant that some of the things that you've mentioned, the planning is actually the key issue, the schools addressing these, because as we currently stand today, most of Wakefield schools, talking about Wakefield, or even wider than Wakefield, let's talk West Yorkshire, are what we call academies, and they've got their own ideas of what they feel is an appropriate way of teaching and what they feel is important within there. And some schools do an excellent job, whereas others won't. Moving away from the local authority model or a joint working trust model has probably created some of these issues, and they cannot be reversed simply by financial planning. And I think financial support, when there needs to be planning at a local level and a regional level to address these issues, and it has to be done mainly focused on what sort of curriculum is offered in schools, what sort of places, as you said, mental health support workers, mental health coaches in schools. And these are the things that really is lacking within the motion. And I think for that reason, and a number of other reasons as well, I just don't believe that the motion is fully complete. I don't think it's the right motion. And I think it was well intended, but I do think what Councillor Jones actually said in his deliverance speech was what should have been placed inside this motion. And, the concerns that, the number of young people and families that are struggling at this moment in time, particularly down to finances and other things, and the support that's available in schools may be lacking at this moment in time. And if that to us, I just think that had this motion had the information that you said directly within there, I would have been the first person to support it. I do think that it probably needs, I would recommend probably going back and additional information being placed in there. And the other bit that I'm not in favour at all is right into the whole health. I don't think that's the solution. I don't think right into the health secretary or even central government. I think it has to be done within the schools themselves. There has to be a willingness for schools to spend money on these areas, and some schools within Wakefield do a fantastic job. I could mention some, and there's some equally who do a not a good job or a rubbish job, so to speak, and that I could say that about many different schools across West Yorkshire, and it all depends on the priorities of the school, and there has to be something more structural that changes to make these things happen, rather than just because if money was a magic wand, and we know that doesn't work. You can throw money at a problem, but if the whole point is if you've got a child 1 is in a primary school from a one trust and child 2 is in a primary school of another trust, how are them trusts communicating with each other? Who's their liaison point? What happens there? Does that information drive across? There is something substantial, there's something seriously wrong with the way that schools are structured. And it's not criticism of the academy's model, but I think there's something wrong there that has to be dealt with, and the money is not going to resolve that problem. Matt Hancock's not going to resolve that problem. It has to be done at local level. It has to be done within the district, bringing them schools together and finalising a strategy, a Wakefield strategy or a West Yorkshire one. It has to be done in that way. It's something more meaningful. Because I think this constant passing on, let's pass it on to central government and wait for a top-down approach. I'm not in favour of top-down approaches. We've seen top-down approaches. They don't work. Not in all cases. If that was the case, then we should have school holidays should be fixed across the whole year. Everyone should have them at the same time. It doesn't work. And so we have to look at the real problem, and what you've identified is a massive, massive issue, and it's not going to go away. It's been there undercurrent. It's been there for a long time, and people have been afraid to admit it, afraid to ask for help. And we're having that conversation. It needs to be done in a more structured way, and it needs to be done at a local level.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hamlin. Thank you. We're going to go on next to Councillor Jackie Spade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for raising this important issue. And it's good to note from the motion that the excellent collaborative working that's taking place to support child mental health issues. Not too long ago, I read some rather worrying figures, and I've hunted them out again because I'd like to highlight these for you. And there were some figures that were uncovered by the Shadow Mental Health Minister, and she uncovered them from NHS digital statistics. And it showed that a total of 538,564 children were diagnosed as needing help between April 2019 and March 2020. Some 339,000 were referred for mental health support, with others left waiting for referrals or where referrals were closed before treatment. So from that, fewer than half of those recommended for treatment received help within 3 months. That meant that more than half of them were waiting more than 3 months for the treatment that they need. I think it's absolutely outrageous that so many of our most vulnerable children are not getting the help they need when they need it. And clearly those figures were for the year prior to our pandemic year. So the latest figures which will come out, as we would all expect, are likely to be much higher. I therefore support the motion in calling for appropriate long-term financial support to tackle what I believe is a very serious health issue for our children.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spade. So I don't have any other comment or questions on this indicated to me. If you want to speak on the motion, Councillor Jones, as motion, then come up now. If not, then we're going to move on then now.
Can I just briefly say, Mr. Mayor?
I'm coming.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Don't worry, darling. We'll do it from the top. Councillor Jones, as mover of the motion, you have the right to reply. In exercising your right to reply, may I remind you that no new matter can be introduced.
Yeah, thanks. I know obviously Councillor Ahmed and I share previous careers, and it's nice in education. It's nice to know, obviously, that we do agree on something. That, in reality, since certainly 2013, the government has rearranged the organisation of education, so schools do operate on a much more independent basis. So it's difficult to ensure that you get a very sort of a common approach to education. But I think it's also fair to say the motion isn't just about education, not about just in schools. It's about being out there in the community, and I think it was really pleasing, of course, that Councillor Carrington talked about the work that she's been doing with the mental health first aiders, because that is in essence where we do need to move into those areas, because I totally agree with Councillor Ahmed. It can't be just in schools. Schools haven't got enough time. Yes, they could have a mental health counsellor, as Anne Longfield has talked about, but the reality is it has to be broader than that, and that's what this motion was about. It was about looking at how the community, how going out and using other services and that are able to deliver that much needed support for young people in the future. So it's not just a focus on schools, it is about the community, it's about local authorities, and it is about that collaborative approach. I think it was true to say that the best work is often done at local levels by local authorities. I think the government's coming round to that realisation now, and particularly with the vaccinations has proved that. Give it to the local authorities and they can deliver it. So on that half, I'd like to move my motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones, indeed. We're going to go now to take the motion, Councillor Jones's motion, to the vote, if we will. We'll just put that back on. Once again, I'm going to take each political group in turn. Firstly, I'm going to go to the controlling Labour group members only. Please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or if you wish to abstain. Now, please. Councillor Rose, did your thing come on then? Or is it, right? Okay. Just a movement in the background. So, as no members of the controlling Labour group have voted against the motion or have abstained, I will take that all the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of Councillor Jones's motion. I will take your silence as confirmation of that. If not, please indicate now. Thank you. If you could all bob your microphones back on mute for me. I'm now going to move on to the Conservative group. Please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or if you wish to abstain.
Against.
Against.
Good.
Against.
Against.
Okay, right. Stop.
Against.
Okay, that's right. So
Against.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take this one and we're going to say it again because it's written in my script wrong. And what we're going to do is we're going to take it, whether you wish to put your microphones back on, Conservative Labour group, Conservative group, please. And if you wish to vote for the motion or wish to abstain, please speak now. Right. I take it that no members of the Conservative group have voted for the motion. So I will take it that all members of the Conservative group are against the motion. If you, I'll take that silence as confirmation of that. If not, speak now. Thank you very much indeed for that one. And I'm going to move on finally, if you can bob your mics back on mute for me. I will move on to that's the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon. And if you turn on his microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote for, against, or abstain for the vote.
For.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gordon. Therefore, the second motion is carried. And we're going to thank Councillor Jones and all the participants for that. And then we're going to move on to the third motion, which is from Councillor Mrs. Heptinstall. Would you please move your motion to Council?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Addressing the crisis in social care has never been so important. The word crisis would suggest that urgency is needed. However, the government appears to have become desensitised to one of, if not the biggest, issues facing our communities and our residents right now. This is about every resident in the Wakefield district. Social care will impact all of us in some way or another at some point in our lives. We have listened to a long line of broken promises, one of which I hold in front of me, which is the response to the last resolution in 2019. In 2019, this council resolved to call on the government to get on with the business of publishing its much delayed and long awaited green paper, outlining future funding options and possible solutions to the adult social care crisis, and to ensure that local authorities are given funding certainty for the immediate to long term. We also resolved to press the government to consider, as part of these proposals, extending the principle that underpins our NHS, fully funded, free at the point of need, personal care. I quote the Minister of State for Care in 2019 in the response that I received. As the Prime Minister said on the steps of Downing Street, the government will set out its plans to fix the crisis in social care once and for all, to give every older person the dignity and security they deserve. Unfortunately, we're still waiting. In 2019, it is fair to say that none of us could have predicted the devastating effects that the coronavirus would have on the district, but particularly our most vulnerable residents. As the proposed resolution states, it is now 20 months on from the Prime Minister's first speech in which he pledged, "We will fix the crisis in social care once and for all, with a clear plan we have prepared." The prepared plan is yet to be seen. This month's budget once again contained no such plan for social care reform. The coronavirus crisis has laid bare the inadequacies of the current social care system, which has been stretched to breaking point as a result of years of underfunding and growing demand linked to an ageing population. Residents are paying the price of the government's failure to bring forward their long-promised plan to tackle the social care crisis. Shifting the burden of social care costs onto local taxpayers through the introduction of the adult social care precept only serves to exacerbate this situation. We need a social care system that is fit for purpose, is properly funded and meets the needs of the most vulnerable. A plan that puts care at the centre of society. We need a plan that will support people being able to live the life that they need and deserve. As of March 2021, Wakefield Council provide care and support for over 6,500 residents, with the average age of the residents supported being 82. The Wakefield district has over 35,000 unpaid carers, and these are just the ones we know about. The pandemic has led to more people within our district taking on caring responsibilities. Any long-term solution should be based on the principle of social care being free at the point of need and accessible to all. should ensure that professional carers are given the time, resources and skills needed to carry out their role and are properly paid for the job that they do, and should recognise the important role of and personal and financial implications of unpaid carers, ensuring that they are able to access services and support to help them deliver care. I would ask this Council to support this motion, which resolves to write to our district's MPs outlining this Council's concerns and calling on them to push the government into committing to a care system that residents can rely on. And write to the government asking them to initiate cross-party talks as soon as possible and urgently bring forward its proposals, including a clear timetable for reform so that we can finally put social care on a sustainable footing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hepkinsall. Very good report put forward there. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of Councillor Mitchell, I will be seconding the motion.
That's fine, Councillor Forster. In seconding the motion, do you wish to formally speak now or reserve the right to speak later in the debate?
I'd like to speak now, Mr. Mayor, please.
Councillor Foster, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In seconding this motion, I'm sure members in this chamber will agree the current social care system is not fit for purpose and it's failing the very people who rely on it, as Councillor Hepkinsall has pointed out. There are clearly high levels of unmet need, providers that are struggling to deliver quality of care that our older, vulnerable and disabled members of our society have the right to expect. Clearly, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated many of these problems, increasing levels of unmet need and destabilising an already fragile care provider market. Age UK, in most recent estimates, say the current unmet need within the older populations are in the region of 1.5 million, which is quite a significant figure. Members must also realise that if a care provider fails and closes their provision, it is the local authority who has to pick up this care provision and find alternative places. This means moving vulnerable people from what has become their home into a new, and for them what is a frightening place they neither know nor understand. More public funding has to be found to create a better functioning social care system. A significant benefit of this will be to reduce the number of frail and elderly people accessing A&E simply through the lack of care in their own home. We have to realise that since 2010, state spending on adult social care has been cut significantly. Somewhere in the region of about 86 million has been removed from these budgets. Currently, council taxpayers are forced to make up some of this shortfall by making payments through their council tax. And it's because of this I'm seconding this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Forster. Does any member wish to speak on the motion? Please put your comment or question in the box, if you will. I've got first one from Pauline Kitchen. Councillor Pauline Kitchen, you're on.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, our social care is in crisis for some. It should never be based on the more financially secure you are, the better the care you can access. Everyone should access care dependent on their need rather than how much money they have. It is our duty to care for our elderly and vulnerable. We need a system that cares for everyone, free to the point of need. I fully support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Pauline Kitchen. Moving on next for a comment from Councillor Betty Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In supporting this motion, I fully agree with the comments that have been made by the proposer and the seconder. It's a disgrace in this day and age that we have a caring system that is actually in tatters. It started way back in terms of how to prioritise, how to privatise, and at the same time recognising, as we all do, the value that the private sector has had in looking after our older people. The situation that they've all been through in our residential homes, in delivering care in homes during the last year, has been tremendous. And those people out there have put their lives on the line, as well as everybody else who's been trying to support them. We've seen over the years that we've had promise after promise. And as has already been mentioned by Councillor Heptonstall, we are still awaiting the green paper to provide this care plan. The National Health System was built on the free at the point of need and contact. And yet here we are. We've had a threat hanging over the people's heads who've worked all their lives, who've had some savings in their bank accounts that would nicely look after them, but the threat hanging over their heads was if it went above the range of money in their bank, then they had to be looking to the future of their home, their personal home that they've lived in, being sold off to pay any of their bills for the future or those that they've accrued. Now we know from the caring providers out there, that times have been tough for them as well, in terms of the amount of money that they have been receiving and in the enablement of providing care through that. It's a disgrace in terms of those older people, and at the same time I have great concerns about those in the community who may need that support, but because of situations they find themselves in, won't come forward. And that is because at times we have people who think to themselves, well, will I or won't I be eligible? We've had lots of reports coming out from the government, and the latest one I heard about was actually the effect of the pandemic, and that was applicable to those people suffering loneliness and isolation. And that was about some people as well, particularly our older generation, being frightened and actually to put themselves forward for care, either through their home or having to be taken into the residential establishments. We've seen a drop in the amount of older people and places going into our residential establishments. I think it's time that this government, and in particular the Prime Minister, who stood on the steps and said he was going to sort it all out, did sort it out. This has gone on far too long, and at the same time we've had resources cut to other service providers who actually all pooled together to help give and deliver services to our older people. We've had budget cuts upon budget cuts, and for the last 12 years these have actually also included the cuts to the mental health services, which is a great part of delivering some security to our older people, whether they're at home needing care or supporting them in the community or supporting them in their residential homes. And it's time now that as a society we are supposed to be a caring society. I believe we should be a caring society, Mr. Mayor, and I do think it's time that the government stopped looking for excuses when they can actually spend £400 million on supporting a bankrupt organisation to send satellites up into the air to be part of a platform of the provision of IT for the future, when they can actually at the same time encourage through various meetings, and it's there to be seen, please look it up, where letters can go across departments and finish up on Dominic Cummings' desk to have another billionaire come in to support this bankrupt group as well. We found out the taxpayers now are paying for this. I'm sure the taxpayers, when we look at them, would actually prefer the system to actually take that £400 million and put it towards our elderly care and make sure that they have the respect that they deserve for the rest of their life. I'm sure at the same time, Mr. Mayor, that they would have loved to have had the £75 million that was given to an organisation for delivery by ships that didn't have a ship to their name, and only actually got back, I believe, a third of that money. So let's look to where it's being wasted. Let's cut back some of that and put it back where it's needed, back to the care of those people who have given their life for this country. We've had examples of people through this economic and pandemic situation raising money. Let's give them some raise back and deliver the dignity that they deserve, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes, for that lovely comments. I've got another comment just coming in now from Councillor Jackie Spade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't intend to speak on this, and listening to the proposer, the seconder, and everyone who's spoken, I'm just so impressed by the thoughtfulness that what's been said and the eloquence of everyone that's spoken, and I can't better any of that. But there is something that I just want to mention. We talk about adult social care and we think instantly of elderly people. Well, adult social care also encompasses some much younger people, people who may have disability issues, special needs, and their care and needs are equally important. And at the moment, the funding isn't there to meet all the diverse needs that exist. And it's really important, I think, that we all think deeply about this issue, because it will affect us all. If we don't already know a member of our family that has been affected and struggled to get the right sort of care needs, and one day it may be one of us. And I don't think we could discuss anything more important today in this chamber than this issue. And sometimes I've thought a few times when we've had the different reports, and quite often the adult care report, it's so important. It contains such important information. It's so crucial to all our lives, and often it doesn't get questioned. But I will get questioned about sports facilities at Ossett or rundown swimming pools in Nottingham. And, you know, I think we have to think a bit more about some of the issues that really matter to us all. And I can't tell you how much I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spade, as well. I've not got anybody else indicated that they've got a question or a comment to make on the motion. So therefore, I'm going to go back to Councillor Mrs. Heptonstall. As moved with the motion, you have the right to reply. In exerting your right to reply, may I remind you that no new matter may be introduced. Councillor Mrs. Heptonstall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, can I thank Councillor Foster, Kitchen, Rhodes and Spate for all your comments, and particularly the comment from Councillor Spate regarding young people and ensuring that these people get the support they need too. So thank you very much for that. Moving forward, we really need to change the narrative to one where we're not begging for a paper that addresses our residents' needs, to a narrative where we're talking about our residents despite their need for additional support, ensuring that they're living a life that makes them happy and healthy as possible. We're talking about our mums, our dads, our aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, friends. We're talking about all the people in this district that we collectively represent. As the motion states, cross-party agreement is needed if we are ever to achieve a long-term sustainable solution to this urgent crisis that lays stark before us, and I would urge all members to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Mrs. Heptonstall. Good motion in front of us there. And what we're going to do now is take that to the vote, if you will. Once again, I'll be asking each political group in turn, firstly to the controlling Labour group members only, if you could please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or if you wish to abstain. So that's whether you want to vote against the motion or abstain. Please speak now. As no members of the controlling group have voted against the motion or abstained, I will take it that all the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the motion, and I will take silence as confirmation. If not, please indicate now. Thank you very much, controlling group, Labour group. If you could put your microphones back on mute. I'm now going to move across to the Conservative group. Please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or if you wish to abstain.
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 Abstain. Abstain.
Okay, wait. We'll reverse that down the road a bit. And what we will say is leave your microphones on, and if you wish to vote to abstain, please, if you wish to abstain, don't speak. If you want to vote against or for the motion, please speak. I'm going to take that to mean that all the members of the Conservative group have voted to abstain on the motion. and I will take the silence of that to be confirmation of that you've all voted to abstain, and the record will read that you've all abstained. Thank you. I'll take silence of that. All the Conservative members have abstained. Please put your microphones back onto mute for me. And I will now ask the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon, could you please turn on your microphone and state clearly whether you wish to vote for, against, or abstain from the motion?
For.
For. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Gordon. The motion, the third motion in front of us today, is passed. Thank you. The fourth motion is from Councillor Eyre, and members who have already declared a pecuniary interest on this agenda item at the start of the meeting need to leave the meeting or take no part in the discussion of. Once the vote has been taken place, you will be invited back to the meeting. Could you please leave now? They were Councillors Mrs. Austin and Councillor Byford. I think Councillor Tully already has gone from the meeting. You can do that now for me, please. But leave your computer on and we'll tell you when to return to the meeting in the comment box. So thank you, Councillor, for moving this motion. Could you please move your motion now to Council? Thank you, Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The motion, which is presented in the book, which is in front of us today, asks this virtual council chamber just a simple question: do we or do we not support an increase of more than 1% pay rise for NHS staff and public service workers? It's already been mentioned previously today, Mr. Mayor, that yesterday marked the year anniversary of when the UK went into lockdown, and since that day the world has witnessed hundreds of thousands of people lose their life, and many of us will know someone, if not yourself, who has been infected by COVID, and many of us will know someone who has sadly lost their life because of it. This year has been awful. Last year has been awful. It's been horrible. It's been hard for everyone, whether it's the people have lost a loved one, or being isolated and not seeing loved ones, being furloughed and losing your job, put horrible in their homeschooling, and the impact what the isolation has done to many people's mental health. And by moving this motion, I just wanted to take a minute to remember those we have lost over this past year and reflect a bit and give thanks to those that kept this country moving when it was brought to its knees back in March last year. I won't do an exhaustive list because we should all know by now who those people are and who kept the country going. But me saying thank you today to those people, or other councillors and Boris down in London, just doesn't really cut it enough. It's not enough to the NHS staff who've worked hundreds of hours unpaid overtime, have risked their lives on the wards and have seen their colleagues die and worked in an environment which I and many other people truly can't or won't even begin to imagine. Giving key workers and NHS staff a clap on a Thursday night was a good thing to do. Giving them a pay rise, which is substantially above inflation, is the right thing to do. All our public service workers who have endured years of pay restraint deserve a proper, real terms pay increase that is fully funded by the Westminster government. With that, Mr. Mayor, I move this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Eyre. Is the motion seconded?
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Seconding the motion there is Councillor Michelle Collins. Councillor Collins, in seconding the motion, do you wish to formally speak now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
I'll speak now.
Councillor Collins, the floor is yours.
In seconding this motion, Mr Mayor, I will be repeating some of the points that Councillor Eyre has raised, and that is on purpose, because I don't think they can ever be raised enough. After a decade of austerity, our public services have struggled through this pandemic on a shoestring, and we all know in this virtual meeting the impact of cut after cut, of hundreds of millions of pounds axed from local government budgets, year after year by Tory and coalition governments. The people that have carried us through this crisis, they are the nurses and the care workers, the refuge workers, the teaching assistants, the caterers, the cleaners. They're the people who work in our hospitals, our clinics, our community health centres, schools, depots, supermarkets. As Councillor Eyre said, Mr Mayor, it is a good thing that we were clapping our key workers, and ministers are quick to do that on the steps of Downing Street. But now the time has come to regard those heroes of the pandemic. The applause seems to be forgotten. We can afford to waste billions on a test and trace system that does not work, but we cannot apparently afford to give it anything other than a real terms pay cut for those who have risked their lives and some sadly lost their lives to care for us. This is an abrogation of duty by this government. It is a kick in the teeth to every worker who worried whether they had the right PPE and whether they would take that virus home to their families. It is an absolute insult to those who went above and beyond, the unpaid overtime, the coming in early, the missed breaks and the extra sleepovers. Now, how we respond as a nation as we rebuild our economy will show what sort of society we are, who and what we value. I value the job security, the families, the time and the communities of our key workers over Conservative cronies and dodgy donors who have profited from this crisis. I support the cause of our frontline workers, our key workers and our trade unions to do right by those who have done right by us. It's time for this government to put their money where their mouth is and show us how much they really do value key workers. With that, I second it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Collins. We're going to move on to now is ask any of the members wish to speak on the motion. May I remind members that speeches must be directed to the question under discussion or to personal explanation or a point of order, and no speech must exceed 5 minutes. First of all, I've got Councillor Pauline Kitchen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, our NHS is the flagship of our country since its birth. I, like everyone else who has needed the NHS and its dedicated staff, especially over the last 12 months, I congratulate and thank them. The healthcare workers, frontline staff, they have once again gone over and above by keeping us safe whilst putting themselves every day on the front line to COVID-19. They deserve recognition and most of all a proper wage rise, which in my opinion is way long overdue. We need our healthcare professionals to feel valued, so everyone else who works for our NHS. All our public sector works deserve a fair pay and proper to reflect their contribution to us all. I support this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Kitchen. I'm going to move on to next, a comment from Councillor Betty Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In support of this motion and the comments that have been made previously, I have to say that, again, here we are with the gem of our country, the National Health Service, who from the coalition government actually suffered billions of pounds of cuts, and at the same time decided way back when Jeremy Hunt was actually the Minister for Health not to put in place plans to deal with the outcome of such a pandemic as we've had. The nurses, the staff and everybody involved in the provision of care, and I'll include our public service workers, many of whom our public may not know, finished supporting the horrible situation of bereavements by going out and digging graves. Some of our staff actually went out to work and support undertakers in the crematoria. That's the dedication that public service has given to the people that we know at a time when the situation was so bad that they needed every support they could get out there in the community. It saddens me, Mr. Mayor, it saddens me tremendously. I worked in the health service for 20 years. I loved every minute of it, and the wages weren't good, but you know, we're there because we cared. These nurses, the staff, everybody involved in the public service and in the health service are there because they want to be. They've been through situations this last year that nobody could have envisaged. But yet, yes, I stood on my doorstep and I banged my saucepan. I'd have been there anyway because I have loved every minute of it. I care tremendously about the NHS. But then what do we get? We have the clapping and then we have the slap. The slap from a Prime Minister and the government who, looking at the pay of the nursing profession as now, and indeed the
Betty, can I just say to you, Betty, that you've gone on mute, darling. Yeah.
I'm here. Sorry, I have been having problems, Mr. Mayor. It was telling me I was disconnected, but I'm back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Betty.
Okay.
Take it from the bit where you were banging your saucepan.
Okay. Yes, I banged the saucepan, and I'd bang it every day of the week. And of course, what we had was a clap and then a slap to everybody out there in our NHS, in our caring profession, in our public services who haven't had a pay rise for 7 years. And it's time that we recognise the value of the services we have. Believe me, other countries in the world would yearn to have a service like ours, our NHS, and we've got to make sure it's there to help people when they need it. We have had a situation, and we have a situation, where within the health service at the moment, we have more vacancies than we've ever had because the pressures that have been in people before the pandemic. So now one can only imagine the increase in that. We need to be recruiting. How are we going to recruit people to come into a service that doesn't think their pay is aligned to the quality that they want to, of the care given? And I'm also sad to say, Mr. Mayor, but not surprised, that I've seen some correspondence that actually a letter was sent to our Tory MP, who responded by saying he supported the 1%. Well, you know, I'm not surprised at that either. But I think it's time that the country realised the 1% is the last part of a 3-year review. It's going to be reviewed again in May. We shouldn't have to wait for the review in May by a pay body to recognise what's gone on. We shouldn't, as a society, and I said before, who care for people when they're most needed, have to be going with a begging bowl to be saying, please, please, can we have some more money? And we can't support a situation where clap your pan then means a slap in the face. No, 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 that's not the way to deal with our professions out there. I fully support the resolution, and I hope that some decency is going to prevail that will actually make this situation come to a better conclusion than what we've got at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rhodes, for that contribution. I'm going to go on next for a comment from Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Mr. Mayor, just a declaration of a pecuniary interest. I won't be able to vote on the motion.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Ahmed. Have I got anybody else who wishes to speak, make a comment, or has got a question on? Yes, I've got. That's woken you up. You must have all been blocked up in the pipeline coming through. Up next, then we've got Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up to about 3-4 years ago, we've been fairly lucky, probably in our family, that apart from the normal sort of ailments, we were lucky, and our health's been fairly good until about 3-4 years ago. And although I know about the National Health Service and I've been there, and they've fixed some broken bones sort of when I was younger, at the end of the day, you have to actually have something serious to understand. my wife, unfortunately, had a serious illness about 3 years ago, and it's not about what the doctors do. It's not about what the nurses do. It's not about the fact that they're brilliant at the jobs that they do. It's about the caring side that you actually see when you go in, and she was in for quite a number of weeks. You actually see how they care about each parent. And unfortunately, I had a similar sort of episode and had to go in and saw exactly the same, the caring side. One of the things that concerns me about all this, and it really does concern me, we've not really talked about something called value. What do we value in this country? It's a real key for me that we've got the best service in the world there, right the way through from the senior consultants, the nurses, the people that do all the cleaning, the porters, everything. We see them, we clap them. Betty's right. Everybody that's been speaking's right. We clap them. We know. But then we get this government, and I've got to say it, and I'm going to put a political angle to it. This government comes in and devalues the whole organisation in my sort of opinion, and it worries me. Betty's touched on it. It worries me, and I think the reason they think they can do it and get away with it is because the people that are in there actually do it, as Betty and as Michelle and as George has said, they do it because they care. A lot of the time it's not about the money, but we should now care for them and give them a decent living wage for all the work, not just through the pandemic, which was unbelievable, but for all the work they do every day of every week of every year for all of us. And if we can't do anything more than 1%, then we should all hold our heads in shame. And that's including our Conservative colleagues. We should all be voting for this, and we should all be saying to this government, you should stand up and support the people who support us. That's why I support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Shaw. Up next, I've got Councillor Richard Hunt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and apologies. I won't be able to vote it, so I'm declaring a pecuniary interest, and I do apologise for that.
No worries at all. Thank you for doing that, Councillor Hunt. Do I have any more comments or questions to the motion as proposed by Councillor Eyre? I've got Councillor Olivia Rowley next.
I actually thought that Councillor Hunt was going to vote in favour of this, but anyway, I'd just like to say that I think everybody has spoken very emotionally and effectively on this issue. It's really, really important, but the sadness of it all is that, first of all, we weren't prepared for the virus because we've had so many cuts, austerity for the last 10 years. And then what we've actually seen in the past year is that the people who are doing all the work and putting their lives at risk are actually not being rewarded, and the people that are doing little have become wealthier and wealthier, and the gap between the wealthy and the poorer has actually widened in the past year and will no doubt get worse in months and years to come. And I think it's tremendously sad that a society that can't reward the people that are doing such valuable work is just a very sad society, and we all should be supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Rowley. Any more comments or questions on the motion put forward by Councillor Eyre? If not, I'm going to return you back to Councillor Eyre, because George, you've got a chance as mover of the motion. You have the right to reply, and exerting your right to reply, may I remind you that no matter can be introduced. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think there's anything else that can be said that's already been said, other than let the the voting, do the talking. So move the motion. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eyre. We're going to move on to the voting then now. Once again, I'm going to take each political group in turn. Firstly, to the controlling Labour group members only, please turn on your microphone and state clearly to me if you wish to vote against the motion or abstain. That's against the motion or abstain. Please speak now. As no members of the controlling group have voted against the motion or have abstained, I will take this that the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the motion, and I will take your silence as confirmation of that, or please indicate now. Thank you once again, all the members of the Labour group, and if you could put your microphones back on mute for me as we move across now to the Conservative group. All turn your microphones on, but I must ask that Councillor Hunt and Nadine Ahmed, who've already registered an interest in this, it doesn't mean you speak in this one. So we're going to ask the Conservative group, please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against or if you wish to abstain on the motion.
Abstain.
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 Okay, so what we're going to do is going to reverse that back up the road a bit again. And what we're going to do is to say, leave your microphones on. And what I'm going to do is to say to the remaining members of the Conservative group, other than Councillor Ahmed and Councillor Hunt, I'm going to say, I take it that you all wish to abstain. If you do not wish to abstain from voting for the motion, then please speak now. And I will take that silence to mean that all the members of the Conservative group have voted to abstain from the motion, and that's what the record will read. Thank you, all the members of the Conservative group. If you can pop your microphones back onto mute for me now, I will go to the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon, and ask you to please turn on your microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote for, against, or abstain in the motion.
For.
That's okay, that's registered, Councillor Gordon. Thank you very much, and therefore that motion is carried. Can I now ask for those members who declared a disclosable pecuniary interest to be invited back into the meeting? So if we can type up onto the thing that anybody who handed out or were outside, just type it up and then we'll make sure they've got it. And who's doing it? So now we hopefully have got everybody back and returned, everybody all on Kidor. I got the thumbs up with that, and I've got the last motion on the agenda. It's from Councillor Ahmed. Could you please move your motion to Councillor Ahmed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to very short. So the horrific case of Sarah Everard has shocked this district and the whole country. And I think particularly young people that I've seen have expressed this within schools and colleges that I work across. Whilst an awful case like this is very rare in this country, it is a reminder of women and females in general of the steps that they take on a daily basis to keep themselves safe. Alongside bringing in landmark legislation to toughen up sentences for sex offenders, to put more police officers on our streets, the government are taking immediate steps to ensure women feel safer, which is commendable. We must drive out violence against women and girls and make every part of our criminal justice system work to better protect and defend them. The government are investing 45 million on practical measures to ensure women feel safer in the nighttime economy and across our communities. Opening the first ever violence against women and girls survey, listening to victims about their experiences. So far, 137,000 people have responded with their stories, which will inform the new strategy to be published shortly. Delivering our landmark domestic abuse bill, protecting victims from this heinous crime, which strengthens protections for victims, whilst also tackling perpetrators at the earliest stage to ensure that they feel the full force of the law. Wakefield Council, alongside other councils, must also step up to the plate to do all it can to support these national efforts and to keep women safe, especially the women in the council workforce, our workforce, to ensure there is never any avenue for harassment, bullying, or intimidation. This is why we are calling on the council today to immediately set about the task of reviewing policies and procedures to ensure that they not only remain fit for purpose, but we go further and send a message to tighten and strengthen provision where they may fall short. To have all important dialogue with our employees to move these important protections forward. If we stand by, we are simply stepping back from our obligations and our duty to care to continue to strive for better. This is the right moment to advance these discussions and to work together to achieve a better deal for women in our workplace. It also sends out a powerful signal to women in the district that Wakefield is taking a stand and doing what is right, not standing idly while others act. This requires an effort from everyone, and today we can mark the first day of that renewed effort to address these important matters. As I believe it's social justice, I believe in the idea that no matter what it is, where there's inequality, injustice going on, it's our duty to speak up and address these. And this is just a sad occasion that's given me a moment to address this, as I have always done within my role as a councillor. I hope that councillors opposite and from other parties can put aside party politics, which I've not seen today actually, and work with us to support our motion. And in doing so, get to work on these issues straight away. It's not the time to hide behind excuses, which represent nothing more than stale status quo. I would ask and urge everyone to get behind this motion and support the women in our workforce by getting scrutiny to draw up a plan of work to improve our policies and practices, and to get a councillor champion appointed to act as a powerful voice for women. I'm asking today for all councillors supporting this motion and drawing the motion is something that you are all of. The incident that I referred to is something that every single council member is aware of, and I believe it's important that we address this as councillors and send out a clear message. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Byford, I do think you've come off of mute, my friend, and put your thing on. So that's beautiful if you could. What we're asking for next, after Councillor Ahmed has put the final motion to us there very eloquently, I'm looking to see if the motion is seconded, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mrs. Binns. In seconding the motion, do you wish to speak formally now or reserve your right to speak until later in the debate?
I'll speak now.
Councillor Binns, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In seconding this motion, I'm mindful of the national conversation that is now taking place across our district and our society, seeking to highlight and address the very important issue of the safety and the welfare of women. As councillors, we are the collective corporate employer to a large number of women in our workforce, and quite rightly have a duty of care to them. The obligation is upon us all, in whatever position of responsibility we hold, to continue to do everything in our power to leave no stone unturned in a shining light on all instances of harassment against women. This council may already provide what seems like the necessary basic policies and practices to address any allegations of harassment. But this mindset can at times become lazy and bureaucratic to the real needs. We must never stand still on these matters. Otherwise, we run the risk of being seen as out of touch, ill-equipped and disinterested in tackling harassment in the workplace. Harassment in all forms is utterly contemptible, and when it's perpetrated against women and girls is equally vile, degrading and reprehensive. Council needs to speak with one voice today in stepping up the mark, being proactive and forward-looking, and taking the necessary, proportionate and sensible actions that the Conservative Group have set out today in our motion to the Council. Bear with me. Our proposals instruct the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Management Board to set up a working group to review the Council's policies and practices with regards to harassment against women in the workplace and to take evidence.
to update the Council's policies and practices accordingly, to bring forward any additional measures that are deemed appropriate to address this matter, and for the Council to appoint a councillor champion from amongst our number to be a powerful voice for women in the workplace, and to work with council officers and others to educate people on how their behaviours impact on others. I hope that the Labour councillors will put party politics aside this afternoon and join with us in supporting this positive motion, and to clearly demonstrate our collective and unanimous resolve to support the women in our workforce and women and girls across our district. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Binns, in seconding the motion. What we're going to do now is move forward and ask if anybody wishes to speak on the motion. May I remind members that speeches must be directed to the question under discussion or to personal explanation or a point of order. So speech may exceed 5 minutes. First up on that speech is Councillor Olivia Rowley. Yeah? Oh yes, Councillor Rowley was on the last one. Okay. Councillor Maureen Cummins was going to start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I welcome this. I welcome this motion because I think that women in the workplace, whether it be the council or any workplace, should be protected with anything that will help them work and be free from fear. The council do have a strategy or a policy which is reviewed by the CSP every year about harassment in the workplace, not just women but men as well. And we do have you know, plans in place that women can go to, and we do have training in place. I fully support this, and I welcome scrutiny in what we do within the council to help and support women. But I think it could be wider than this, and I really think that any woman shouldn't be afraid of living a life that is safe and fear-free. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cummins. Do I have any other comments or questions? I have got Councillor Rowley, as though I knew you would be coming in there. Councillor Olivia Rowley next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, first of all, I'm a bit bemused by Councillor Ahmed saying that he hopes we'll not have a political stance on this when he's clearly had a political stance on all the previous resolutions, you know, can't support elderly people in care and can't support the vulnerable to have a wage increase. But anyway, it's an interesting resolution. I mean, it's on the back of a very violent murder of a woman who wasn't actually in employment at the time. She was walking home. And my main concern is of the sheer number of women that are killed every year by their partners, and often they're not taken seriously by the police. In fact, I think there was one woman quoted today that she was actually fined £90 by the police for wasting police time and died the following week at the hands of a partner. So I think it needs to be much wider in terms of domestic abuse, the fact that there's no register of abusers. So in fact, you could meet other women and having done quite a lot of damage to previous partners, and there's no record of that. And new partners are not informed that their partner may have a history of violence. And I think we should be pushing very much like the Child Protection Register for register of people who have committed crime time and time again. I understand that 85% of domestic abusers have actually abused in the past. I'm also a bit concerned about the reference to the police. In fact, there hasn't been a sizable increase in the police. All it's done is a number were redundant or retired in the last round of cuts, and they're now in a situation where some have been replaced, often doing degrees and so forth. So I don't think we're seeing them much on the streets, I have to say. Whether women will feel protected as a result of that is questionable. And I think, yes, we should be looking more carefully at how we support women generally, but particularly those subject to domestic abuse. And I know that we advertise it within the council and try to give support, but the question is, maybe through scrutiny, are we doing enough to help women generally? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Rowley. Some good points made there. Councillor Maureen coming up with a comment about Clare's Law, which is something that was put on the statute books, I think, quite a few years ago now, isn't it? Yeah. Any other comments or questions on this motion that's been put forward by Councillor Ahmed? I don't think I've got any more there. So, Councillor Ahmed, oh, hang on, I've got, wait 1 minute, I've got a late entry tent here. We've got Councillor Gillian Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll just a brief, quick comment, really. It isn't a political issue, this. It's not really appropriate to bring all the other motions into this one and criticise. When I agree with Councillor Binns completely, it should be non-political and across the board, and I think that that is the only message that we were trying to get over there. It's not helpful to bring the rest of the meeting into this issue because women's safety is a great concern. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cruz. No more comments, anybody? Or any more questions on this motion? If not, I'm going to move on now to Councillor Ahmed. As mover of the motion, you have the right to reply. In exerting your right to reply, may I remind you that no new matter can be introduced. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank Councillor Cummins, and Councillor Cummins will be aware that in several council meetings previously, the issue of domestic violence was raised by her with a personal story as well that we, as all councillors, we supported, and it was something that I was unaware of. And it's important that we raise awareness as councillors to each other of these sort of matters. And I think you're right that there could be more added to the motion. I'm hoping that other people will come forward with other things and on any aspect of creating equality and fairness and justice. And I think this is just another motion, non-political in its way. It's been designed in order to express that view across there. And I'm more than open myself, and I'm sure all members of the council are. So if there is anything that needs to be added in, as Councillor Rowley very, very positively, as always, put across, there is a number of things that could be included within the motion, and hopefully in the future, Councillor Rowley and others, including myself, can bring these things forward. We can address these issues we can address these issues of police numbers and what can be done. And Clare's Law, excellent, totally agree with what's been said there. So I'm welcoming the positive, comments that have been done, and hopefully change them into actions. And I think we have to, as councillors, there's certain things that transcend politics, where we can agree that we want a better future for our children, whether they be male or female, and they have that same opportunities that everybody else has. And if we can address them here, and send out the right messages and get things done in the council, maybe that'll send a message to other employers within the district as well. So thank you very much to everybody today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Ahmed, and your motion is going to be now put through the vote. Once again, I'll be taking each political group in turn. Firstly, to the controlling Labour group members only, please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or if you wish to abstain. As no members of the controlling group have voted against the motion or have abstained, I will take this that all the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the motion. And I will take your silence as confirmation. So if not, please indicate now. Thank you for that. Controlling Labour group members can now turn the microphone off, please, for me. I'll put them on mute. We're now going across to the Conservative group, and please turn on your microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote against the motion or if you wish to abstain. As no members of the Conservative group have voted against the motion, I will take it that all the members of the Conservative group are in favour of that motion. And I will take your silence as confirmation. Please indicate now if you don't. Thank you very much. All the Conservative group, please put your microphones back on mute. And I will now ask the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon, will you please turn on your microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote for, against, or abstain the motion. For. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Gordon. And the motion is therefore carried. Colleagues, that is the last item on the agenda. Thank you for your attendance. I'm going to thank everybody here, Gillian, Kathleen, and Mark, Andrew and Rob, all the people who's worked to do the behind the scenes for me here while I've been mayor. And thank you all again, once again, all my fellow councillors for all your attention and lively debate that you've given me over the last 2 years. That's the post the AGM. The next one will be chaired by Councillor Austin, and I wish her all the very best for the future. I know that you'll look after them. Please keep safe, keep well, and good luck in all the elections to every single one of you, and I mean all of that. And I now declare this meeting closed from the one in Wakefield 1 with Disable It, and good afternoon from Wakefield 1 and 2. Bye. Thank you.